Chapter 463. Xueqi was silent. Of course, he knew how capricious the person in front of him was. Reputation was not essential to her. You have to restore your original identity after all. If what happened tonight gets out, it will be bad for your reputation. Xueqi tried hard to suppress the urge to tremble. He secretly bit the tip of his tongue and used the pain to suppress his body's instinctive fear. Why was he afraid? It was not only because of the trauma in his previous life. In this life, he was more afraid that she would find clues and see him as a monster. Zhang Pengji pretended not to understand. Isn't it a good thing to sleep with one's official? Xueqi took a deep breath. He had dealt with the person beside him for many years. His rationality told him that the more agitated he was, the easier it was to fall into her trap, including the so-called sleeping with one's feet on top of another action today. It was either a spur-of-the-moment thing or she had another trap. He had to treat it with utmost attention. "Girl, you must be joking." Xueqi directly pointed out her gender. "You can't dress as a man all your life. You have to restore your identity one day. Even if our relationship tonight is innocent, it will still stain your reputation if it is used as a topic of discussion. Why don't you pay attention to this?" Zhang Pengji clicked her tongue. "I don't care about this intangible thing, but you care about it?" To the common people, whoever gave them benefits was a good person, and that person was worthy of their praises. On the contrary, if anyone violates their interests, no matter how well they have done, they will not hesitate to turn against them. Do you think I need the reputation given by these ignorant people? I don't care. What good reputation or bad reputation? In Zhang Pengji's view, it was more like an invisible shackle imposed on her. Xueqi sighed in his heart. He should have understood that even if the beginning was different, Her Majesty's essence was still the same. I don't care about this empty reputation. A person's life is 100 years, and only a pile of bones will be left behind. Xueqi felt it was a little magical that he could actually talk to this person calmly, but the location was not very good. But Ci cares about your reputation. Almost by coincidence, Xueqi said the truth that was buried in the bottom of his heart and had never been revealed. However, as soon as the words left his mouth, an indescribable sense of crisis rushed straight into his brain from the soles of his feet. Feeling the slender and fair hand on his neck, Xueqi's lips curled into a bitter smile. Did he realize that there was something wrong with him and thought that he was a monster, so he wanted to kill him? At this moment, Xueqi did not feel any fear. His wildly beating heart also returned to its usual speed. Zhang Pengji asked in her usual calm tone, "Are you really Xueqi, Wei Zixiao?" Xueqi replied, "Yes, it's the real deal." After a while, Zhang Pengji did not break his neck. Instead, she said with interest, "Interesting." At first, he had only suspected that the other party was a little abnormal, but now, he was completely certain of it. "Interesting?" Xueqi shuddered, but immediately felt that this was the reaction that His Majesty should have. If an ordinary person knew that someone had reincarnated and knew their future, their first reaction would be fear, and they might even want to eliminate them. But to Her Majesty, this matter was the catalyst that aroused her interest. "Don't you already know that I?" Xueqi could not control his tongue. "What do you want to know?" Zhang Pengji glanced at him and said, "There's no need. I don't want to know." If he had only suspected it at first, then he was completely sure tonight. "Why?" Xueqi asked. Zhang Pengji snorted. "It's like you're reading a story. You've only read the beginning and you've just gotten a little interested, but someone suddenly jumps out and tells you the ending of the story. The good guy in the story is actually a bad guy in disguise. Would you thank the talkative person or want to slap him to death?" Xueqi was speechless. That made sense. He was speechless. Zhang Pengji moved her hand away, turned over, and lay on the bed. Another example, if you use your pocket money to buy a game that you have been looking forward to for a long time, and an idiot jumps out and tells you the hidden Easter eggs and strategy to clear each level of the game, turning all the unknown into known. Will you thank this person for giving you the strategy guide, or will you pick up a kitchen knife and hack him to death? No matter what others choose, I will definitely choose the latter. Don't you think Ci is a monster? Xueqi could understand the former metaphor, but he did not understand the latter. But the core of the two metaphors was the same. Zhang Pengji wanted to laugh, but she did not. Even if he is a monster, He is an interesting monster. Wei Ci was startled, and his cheeks were stained with some heat.
After calming down, there was some sadness in the bottom of his eyes, and a thought arose in his heart, as expected.
No matter how interesting it was just a pet, not love. It was not even close to liking it. Jiang Pengji said meaningfully, people are not made of stone. They can change. What was the advantage of being reborn? For smart people, even if they did not reborn, they could still succeed. For stupid people, they could avoid a pit after being reborn, but they would still fall into another pit because of their stupidity. Rebirth was not to be reborn, and it was not to spend money to increase one's IQ. Relying too much on the so-called memories from before rebirth would only cause one to be in deep trouble. She felt that it was impossible for such a perceptive person like Wei Ci not to see through this point. She also hoped that he would not be disturbed by the so-called memories from before rebirth and affect his real life. Compared to Wei Ci's proper sleeping posture, Jiang Pengji's sleeping posture was a little more bold. She yawned and could not help but stretch her feet. The soles of her feet touched Wei Ci's calf. Cold air rushed straight to the soles of her feet. She instantly shivered, and all her sleepiness was gone. She could not help but frown. Believe me, you are very likable in the summer, but you are too annoying in the winter. Jiang Pengji disliked Wei Ci's low body temperature, and Wei Ci also felt that she was like a small stove. He subconsciously wanted to get closer to her. If he did not use his rationality to restrain himself, his body would have long rebelled. It was late at night, and Wei Ci could not hold on for much longer. In addition, his body was still sick, and he fell asleep in a daze. Then, damn, are you going to sleep tonight? Jiang Pengji wanted to push Wei Ci away. Although she was not afraid of cold or heat, who would like a lump of ice cubes in a warm bed? What happened to the good sleeping posture? Was this how he behaved? In the end, she tolerated it. Her heart softened a little, and she allowed him to come closer unconsciously. Jiang Pengji was bored, so she secretly poked the system. She asked, the anomaly that I caused when I started streaming was Wei Ci, right? The system wanted to pretend to be dead, but it was in Jiang Pengji's spiritual brain realm. It had to bow its head when it was under someone else's roof. It could only say sullenly, so what if it's him? If you are worried, then kill him. For a suspicious person, a fellow who knew his future was really dangerous. He could not sleep. Jiang Pengji snorted and said, do you think everyone is like you? That's why you were locked up by me, and not me being held hostage by you. System. Chapter 464. Wei Ci couldn't remember how long it had been since he had slept so peacefully. Even the nightmares that plagued him had disappeared without a trace. It was a good night's sleep. When he woke up, it was already late in the morning. His side was still warm. It was as if the person beside him had just woken up. He frowned slightly. She just woke up? Others said that she was undisciplined, but in fact, she was more disciplined than anyone else. No matter how late she slept the night before, she would wake up on time the next day to practice. She never slept in. Wei Ci reached out and touched it. He found that the source of the heat was 2 hot water sachets wrapped in heavy cloth. Then, where did the real Jiang Pengji go? In the government office, Feng Jin and the other two had already begun to deal with government affairs. Xueqi's expression was a bit sour. His brows were tightly knitted. Jiang Pengji saw it and asked curiously, who provoked Xiaoyu? Why do you have such a scary expression so early in the morning? Xueqi heard the voice and looked up at his lord. His eyes were bloodshot and he looked a little sleepy. Feng Jin smiled and said, yesterday, Han Mei came back and said that more than 500 people were trapped in the mountains. He wanted to send troops to rescue them. If they were rescued, Xiaoyu would have to arrange accommodation, warm clothes, and food for them overnight. There are too many trivial matters. Xiaoyu didn't sleep last night and didn't eat this morning. Naturally, his expression doesn't look good. It would be strange if Xueqi's expression was good after working overtime in the winter. Yes, Xiaoyu has worked hard. Jiang Pengji teased him. Why don't we pick a time and have a barbecue with you? Qiguan Rang rested his chin on his hand and said coldly, now that the snow has sealed the mountains, my lord shouldn't run around. Spend the winter in peace. Jiang Pengji had gone out to hunt yesterday for the barbecue gathering. In the end, she had brought back more than 500 burdens. Poor Xueqi didn't get to eat barbecue and hot pot. Instead, he had to work overtime the whole night. Thinking of that scene, Qiguanrang couldn't help but feel sorry for Xueqi. It was not easy to be a housekeeper in the county. Zhang Pengji sat down on the main seat. What do you mean spend the winter in peace? Your lord doesn't hibernate.
Qiguanrang rolled his eyes. I heard that my lord carried a person and galloped all the way from outside the city to the district headquarters?
Office gossip. Xueqi and Feng Jin seemed to be doing their job seriously, but in fact, they were secretly listening. They wanted to know who that person was. Seeing how his lord valued him so much, the other party couldn't be an ordinary person. Zhang Pengji admitted it openly.
Yes, I thought that the strange man died of illness.
There's no one on the street, so we won't bump into any commoners. Xueqi showed a surprised expression. There was something wrong with this scene.
Xueqi knew very well what kind of person his lord was.
It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that she was cold-hearted. If it wasn't someone very important or a good friend, she wouldn't even bother to pay attention to them. Who exactly was the person she had saved? Not only him, but the other two were also very curious. Zhang Pengji raised her eyebrows and said calmly, "What's with your expressions?" "I'm just a little curious about who that person is. Is he a close friend of the Lord, or?" "Other than Wenjing, Huaiyu and Xiaoyu should know him. This is Master Yuanjing's disciple, Wei Ci, Wei Zixiao." Zhang Pengji did not hide anything. She said directly, "But he's very sick now. He can't even get out of bed. I'm afraid he'll have to rest for a while before he gets better. Don't disturb his rest for now. When he recovers, he should come to the government office. By then, there would be another highly capable employee. There would be hope to share the administrative work." When Xueqi heard Wei Ci's name, he suddenly thought of something. His ears turned slightly red. He had a problem with voices. He had a deep memory for a pleasant voice. Wei Ci was one of them. Feng Jin and Wei Ci had first met many years ago at Jishan's hot spring. They could be considered to have met once. Qiguanrang was more worried. What if Wei Ci was not easy to get along with and destroyed the internal unity? Master Yuanjing's disciple. Wei Ci had enough capital to be proud of his identity. Thinking of this, Qiguanrang secretly frowned. He planned to ask Feng Jin and Xueqi in private to be mentally prepared. Feng Jin and Xueqi could understand Qiguanrang's worry. Wei Zixiao's personality is a little cold, but he's a gentleman. He shouldn't be too difficult to get along with. Feng Jin and Wei Ci had only met a few times. They didn't have a deep conversation, so their understanding was limited. In comparison, Xueqi knew a little more, but it was only superficial knowledge. It couldn't be considered a true understanding. Qiguanrang sighed and said, "Looks like we have to wait for his condition to improve before we observe him." With Li Yun's hard work, more than 500 people who were trapped in the deep mountains were safely rescued. This is Xiangyang district. Are we really not in Shangjing? Once he entered the city, Zhang Ping felt that his eyes were not enough to take in everything. The ground was paved with green bricks. The road surface was flat and both sides of the street were clean. Not only that, there were things labeled as trash cans at intervals on the street. Occasionally, people would go out to the streets. Looking at them, they didn't seem to be wearing much. But in the cold wind, they didn't shiver. Didn't they feel cold? Zhang Ping looked left and right. He realized that the houses here were different from ordinary houses. They were orderly, neat and beautiful. Separated by a low wall made of green bricks, he could see that the eaves were laid with neat tiles. There wasn't much snow on the roofs. Occasionally, there were people climbing ladders to sweep the snow off the roofs. From the people's attire and expressions, there was no trace of a disaster. When sweeping the snow, they were still talking and laughing. Compared to these people, they really looked like refugees who escaped from a disaster. The district headquarters sent people over to register the people's temporary household registration. Zhang Ping blended in with the crowd and heard a familiar shout from outside. Was it Dian Yan? Where was Zixiao now? Zhang Ping searched for him. Li Yun also noticed the commotion here and came over to ask. Li Yun glanced at Zhang Ping and asked, "Brother Dian, is this the other teacher you're looking for?" Zhang Ping's current image was a little pitiful, but his facial features were regular and his eyes were clear.
One look and you could tell that he was a magnanimous and upright gentleman. Dian Yan nodded and took the initiative to tell Zhang Ping, Mr. Zixiao has been taken to see a doctor. He'll be back when his condition is better.
Zhang Ping's brows twitched. Why did Dian Yan's words sound so strange?
Dian Yan said, Mr. Shiheng, the wind here is strong and cold.
Let's go back first.
Go back where? Zhang Ping turned his head to look behind him. Didn't they say that they would only be arranged accommodation after registering the temporary household registration? Li Yun smiled and explained to him, the Lord has already made arrangements. The two of you don't have to live together with the people. They weren't familiar with the roads in the district city.
Li Yun took the initiative to lead the way. Naturally, they couldn't ask for more.
But the more they walked, the more Zhang Ping felt that something was wrong.
This shouldn't be a place for the ordinary people, right? He asked.
Of course not, Li Yun replied and didn't continue.
Chapter 465.
After a long while, Li Yun stopped in front of a house and gestured to Dian Yan.
Dian Yan understood and handed him the key. With a twist it opened.
This is arranged by the Lord for Mr. Wei.
Since you are with him, stay here for the time being. Li Yun handed the key back to Dian Yan. This was a house with 3 entrances.
Although there were no luxurious decorations in the house, everything was there.
Zhang Ping was dazzled. Then, what about Zixiao? Zhang Ping didn't forget about his companion. Li Yun answered briefly, still in the district headquarters. The Lord is taking care of him. When he recovers, he will move here.
Zhang Ping secretly heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that the Lord admired Zixiao's talent very much. That was why she arranged it so meticulously. Li Yun was a meticulous person. He found clothes suitable for Dian Yan and Zhang Ping's physique. They could change into them after washing up. However, there were no servants in the house. They had to do things like chopping firewood and lighting the fire themselves. Before leaving, Li Yun left a few taels of silver. If they were hungry later, they could find food on the streets.
It's unbelievable. Zhang Ping watched Li Yun leave. Looking around the house, he still felt like he was dreaming.
After a while, he and Dian Yan huddled around the charcoal brazier to keep warm.
Ping can now understand why Zixiao is so insistent on coming to Xiangyang district. To be able to govern a run-down district to its current state in just half a year, there must be a great talent. Perhaps that district magistrate is a wise ruler that Zixiao favors.
Dian Yan nodded in agreement.
After a while, Dian Yan said, Mr. Shiheng, I heard that the district is recruiting soldiers. I want to give it a try.
Zhang Ping looked at Dian Yan and said, a real man is born to build a great career. Now that I see it, Xiangyang district is also a place with crouching tigers and hidden dragons.
With Brother Diane's ability, it's good to give it a try.
Now that the world is in chaos, if you don't think of ways to become stronger, who knows when you will become a pile of bones by the roadside?
Dian Yan asked, then what plans does Mr. Shiheng have?
Zhang Ping was stunned. He followed Wei Ci all the way north because he was worried. Now that the mission was accomplished, he didn't know what to do next. He said, I don't know yet. Probably think of a way to return to my hometown or find a beautiful place to live in seclusion and become an idle person.
Dian Yan persuaded, Mr. Shiheng, it's so chaotic outside. How dangerous would it be for you to travel alone? Why don't we settle it here?
Zhang Ping smiled and said in a carefree manner, I'm not as talented as Zixiao.
At most, I'm a craftsman. I don't do any proper work.
He could not be considered a qualified scholar of the school of Moism. He liked to tinker with those mechanical objects and did not have a deep understanding of the school of Moism. That was why he mocked himself as a craftsman. He did not have many real friends around him, and it was only by chance that he met Wei Ci. Dian Yan didn't understand this and didn't know how to comfort Zhang Ping. Whether it was Mr. Zixiao or Mr. Shiheng, to Dian Yan, they were both good people, and good people should be rewarded. This winter was destined to be an important turning point in the history of the future. In November, Dongqing, Wengzhou, Beiyuan, and Xichang were unable to provide aid in time. The 4 factions of Nanman attacked the capital of Nanxing and fought a bloody battle. After besieging the capital for 2 months, the 4 factions of Nanman completely conquered the capital of Shang.
Nanxing was destroyed.
The kings of the 4 factions of Nanman gave the order to massacre and allowed the soldiers to kill in the imperial city for a day and a night. The next day, the heads of all the men in the imperial family of Nanxing were hung on the city gate, one after another. They died with their eyes open. The women of the imperial family were all made into female slaves for people to buy and sell at will. They were trampled on and humiliated. The land of Nanxing was in a state of mourning. It was no longer as peaceful as it was in the past. The flames of war spread. The 4 factions of Nanman could fight but not defend. They were harsh and greedy. The people had no way to make a living. Under such circumstances, the flames of rebellion were ignited in the land of Nanxing, announcing the arrival of chaos. One of the 5 countries in the world had fallen. At the same time, the north and south of Dongqing were also in a state of chaos. The north became the battlefield of the Tsing-Yi army and the Red Lotus group. In the south, Prince Changshu relied on his military strength to confront the imperial family of Dongqing across the river. The situation was tense and could break out at any moment. Due to the cold winter, it was inadvisable to fight. Both sides temporarily rested their troops. At the end of December, only 3 days before the new year, 2 letters were sent to the capital of Dongqing and to Prince Changshu's military tent. Prince Changshu was a few years younger than the emperor. His private life was rather restrained and he looked much younger than his actual age. What is this? Prince Changshu was hosting a banquet for his advisors and soldiers. A messenger hurriedly came in with a letter. The messenger said, "This letter was shot into the military tent with an arrow." Did someone secretly report to him? Or did an aristocratic family in Chenzhou want to rely on him and use this method to send a letter? Prince Changshu thought about it for a while. He raised his hand and asked the messenger to present the letter. He tore open the envelope and took out the neatly folded bamboo paper. Using bamboo paper as a letter to send a letter? How extravagant! Prince Changshu snorted softly. As he read the letter, he invited his advisors and soldiers to eat and drink. He read the letter with a smile. Many people were also secretly paying attention to his expression and guessing the contents of the letter. But, when he read the contents of the letter clearly, the curve of Prince Changshu's lips became lower and lower. In the end, he even glared angrily. His anger rose. Prince Changshu slammed his palm on the table. His palm turned red at a speed visible to the naked eye. Just listening to the sound made his hand hurt. "Your Highness, what happened?" The number 1 advisor in the tent stepped out and asked. If it was in the past, Prince Changshu would definitely treat him with courtesy and put on a show of harmony between the ruler and his subject. Now, however, he was not in the mood to do so. With a whoosh, he stood up from his seat and did not even look at the strategist. Holding the letter, he walked past him and ordered the messenger, "Go find out who sent this letter." Everyone in the tent looked at each other. Some people secretly mocked the advisor who rushed to slap his face, while others were curious about what was written in the letter that made Prince Changshu lose his composure. In the past, no matter how serious the matter was, Prince Changshu would always maintain his virtuous king demeanor of being courteous to the wise and humble. He would rely on and trust that advisor. Now, he had slapped his face in front of everyone, which made people feel good. The advisor only felt his cheeks burning. He was extremely embarrassed and secretly clenched his fists. He pretended that nothing happened and sat back in his seat. But the mocking and disdainful eyes around him did not decrease. Prince Changshu calmed himself down and regained his senses. Only then did he realize that his actions just now had offended the advisor in his tent. But now, he was not in the mood to comfort or apologize. He was the ruler. If he had to lower himself to apologize and comfort his subordinates just because they threw a little tantrum, it would be too unreasonable. Prince Changshu lost his usual rationality. He could not help but take out the letter and read it again. There was nothing written inside. There was only a string of birth characters and the words, "Lu Shi's daughter of a concubine." Prince Changshu would never forget this string of birth characters even if he died. In the end, the messenger did not find the person who sent the letter. Prince Changshu's memory returned to the past. That year, the apricot flower rain was extremely beautiful. He thought that he could spend the rest of his life with his lover. Even if this woman was once his sister-in-law, but what did it matter? Chapter 466. It was a pity that the happy days were too short-lived. Before his daughter was born, he had to leave them temporarily because of an important matter. When he came back, the cabin that had been filled with joy and happiness was no longer there. A cold letter lay on the table. The woman had left. Because of difficulties, she had left her daughter to be escorted to him by her confidant so that he could take care of her. However, Prince Changsho did not manage to see his daughter. The confidant disappeared along with the child. Prince Changsho could not find the woman, nor could he find his daughter. He could not even find the confidant. Now, what did this strange letter want to express? Lu Shi's daughter of a concubine was his lost child? Such a strange thought lingered in his mind. It was not impossible. Before the woman left Dongqing, she did pay special attention to Lu Shi's backyard. She also hinted that if she could not afford to raise the child, she would leave it in front of the Lu residence and let Lu Shi raise it. However, Prince Changsho thought it was a joke and did not take it to heart. Now that he thought about it, it did not seem impossible. Thinking of this, Prince Changsho's expression turned ugly. When he realized that the daughter of a concubine of the Lu residence had married into the royal family and had become the fourth prince's consort, his expression could no longer be seen. It was not that he felt sorry for his daughter. In fact, his expectations for his daughter were built on the foundation of his daughter's mother. Without that woman, his so-called daughter was dispensable to him. The reason why his expression changed was because he was afraid that Lu Huan's existence would delay his important matters. Lu Shi raised Lu Huan and sent her off with 10 miles of red dowry. He had arranged such a good marriage for her. Obviously, he did not doubt his daughter's bloodline and even loved her dearly. If at this time, someone spread the news that Lu Huan's biological father was not Lu Shi but him, how would Lu Shi react? Prince Changsho put himself in his shoes. He felt that he would probably vent his anger on her. The daughter he loved for so many years was not his biological daughter. Who would be willing to be such a fool? Which man could endure such humiliation? Dongqing had 6 states and 21 counties. Lu Shi monopolized Chongzhou and secretly held on to Hu County's rice. Even if he could not use such a strong ally, he could not completely lean towards the royal family. Prince Changsho had no reason not to worry. Prince Changsho narrowed his eyes, a murderous glint in his eyes. Regardless of whether the contents of the letter were true or false, he could not take the risk. The best way was to assassinate Lu Huan in secret so that there would be no evidence. Although it was a pity, he and Lu Zhang had never met before, so there was no father-daughter relationship between the two of them. Every man for himself, and heaven and earth destroy him. He had indeed let down this daughter of his, but it was only right for a daughter to sacrifice herself for her father. After all, he had given her life. At most, when he wore the dragon robe, he would give his daughter a posthumous title and honor. Thinking of this, Prince Changsho thought it was a pity. If Lu Huan wasn't Lu Shi's daughter and had another identity, he would immediately take the child to his side and love her. But she was Lu Shi's daughter. He could not afford to lose his hegemony. At this critical moment, he could not afford to offend Lu Shi, so he could only say that it was a pity. Prince Changsho probably did not expect that before he had done anything to Lu Huan, she had already caused a huge disaster. From the end of April until now, Lu Huan was almost 8 months pregnant. When she had just turned 6 months, her belly was already comparable to a normal pregnant woman about to give birth. Now, it had grown a lot bigger. The medical officer had examined her carefully and said that she was pregnant with twins. The baby's breathing was very strong. Lu Huan's lips curled into a smile. Even when Wu Ma Jun was despised by the emperor, she did not feel sad or upset. That elixir is really useful. Now that the baby's breathing is strong, the baby will definitely be very healthy. Thinking of this, Lu Huan's smile became brighter. The medical officer said that based on the pulse, there is an 80% chance that it will be a boy and a girl, a dragon and a phoenix. This is an auspicious sign, and the heavens are blessing the imperial family. The child in her belly would be her trump card to completely turn the tables. The closer it was to the day of delivery, the more careful she was. The servant girls by her side were all part of the dowry, so they knew the temper of the fourth princess consort very well. She looked pure, but was actually very sinister. In order to verify whether a stolen elixir really had the effect of aiding pregnancy, she had sent people to defile an innocent woman. Later, in order to get rid of the fourth prince's beloved concubine, Hui Jun, she had even more sinister plans, setting Hui Jun up with the emperor. If not for the emperor's interest in Hui Jun, it would probably be another innocent death. To be the trusted servant girl of such a person, she had to constantly worry whether she would be the next unlucky person.
Although she despised her in her heart, she did not dare to talk back. She only dutifully helped her comb her gorgeous hair.
Lu Huan looked at her clean makeup and frowned unhappily.
Make it more gorgeous, it's too plain. The servant girl's lips moved, but in the end, she had no choice but to obey her order. She put on gorgeous makeup and wore expensive jewels. Her hair was full of pearls and jade, and she looked incomparably wealthy. As a servant girl, she had the obligation to persuade Lu Huan that pregnant women should be more plain. Rouge and face powder were not good for the child in her belly. However, since the last time she tried to persuade her, she had learned to shut up. Looking at the young girl in the mirror with gorgeous makeup, Lu Huan snorted.
How can I be inferior to that slut?
Even if Hui Jun was a person who was doted on by 3,000 people, she was not willing to lose even the slightest bit. She was merely a lowly dowry girl. Did she think that she could become a phoenix just because she was connected to the emperor?
The servant girl lowered her head and did not reply.
However, she knew clearly who the slut, in Lu Huan's words, was. Hui Jun, the most doted woman by the emperor's side. She was truly a lucky person who was doted on by 3,000 people.
Not to mention the other concubines and princes. Even the empress and the crown prince had to give way to her.
Recently, Huijuan's health had not been good. She was bedridden.
When the emperor heard her complaints, he waved his hand and ordered all the concubines to attend to her. Even the current empress had not enjoyed such great favor.
It was clear how important Hui Jun was to the emperor. The servant girl could not understand why her own concubine had to compete with Hui Jun. With their current status, there was no need to compete.
No matter what the servant girl thought, Lu Huan had already dressed herself up to be rich and gorgeous.
She did not look like she was going to attend to someone.
Sitting in the carriage to enter the palace, Lu Huan was still thinking about how to make Hui Jun suffer. Unbeknownst to her, there was already a storm brewing in the palace. What awaited her was a path of no return. With one hand on her stomach and the other on the servant girl's arm, she gently followed the servant girl to Huijuan's bedchamber.
Naturally, Hui Jun was not sick. She was just finding an excuse to keep an eye on the second concubine and to make Lu Huan unhappy. She bullied the emperor's concubines all day. After a while, she felt bored and shifted her target to the daughters-in-law of the concubines. She was clearly healthy, but she still willfully said that she was sick. She stayed on the bed, eating fresh seasonal fruits while ordering the concubines around. She amused herself. Chapter 467. On the other side, the emperor also received a strange letter. It would have been better if he hadn't read it. When he opened it, the contents made him so angry that he smashed everything he could in his rage. Lu Shi's daughter is actually the daughter of Wang Huiyun and Prince Changsho. A wave of anger from being deceived welled up in his heart. No wonder. No wonder. The emperor was furious. He pulled out the knife from the rack and rushed to Huijuan's palace angrily. He could accept that woman giving birth to anyone's child, but he couldn't accept her mixing with his own brother. He still felt guilty for allowing Prince Changsho to develop his power all these years. He didn't expect this to be a planned trap. This couple had long been together, and even produced Lu Huan, the bastard. The palace servants saw the emperor holding a knife and rushing to Huijuan's palace angrily. They immediately gloated. The concubines who received the news secretly guessed that Huijun had an affair and was discovered by the emperor. I think she's just a vixen. It's normal for her to have an affair because she can't stand the loneliness. When the emperor completely dislikes her, I'd like to see how she can still be so stubborn. Humph. Look at the emperor. He looks like he's going to kill someone. I hope she dies with an intact corpse. All kinds of rumors and guesses spread among the people. Unfortunately, the actual development was too different from the picture in their minds. Not only was Huijun not hacked to death by the emperor's knife, she even protected Lu Huan, who was frightened by the emperor's imposing manner, and stopped the furious emperor. Emperor, what are you doing? Do you really want to spread the news that you killed your daughter-in-law? The emperor looked at Huijuan's face and felt sorry for her kindness, but he was also angry at Lu Huan's existence.
Jun-er, get out of my way.
How could Huijun be willing? Lu Huan's child had not even been born yet. If she died now, how could they watch the drama that followed? The medical officer who took Lu Huan's pulse was Huijuan's person.
No one knew better than her the condition of Lu Huan's child. While the two were arguing, the frightened Lu Huan held her stomach with a pale face and wailed continuously. Hui Jun was overjoyed, but she put on a sad face and said, "Even if the fourth princess consort had a reason to die, the child in her womb is innocent.
It is your grandson. Your Highness, I am also a woman who has the opportunity to be a mother. For my sake, please forgive the fourth princess consort for the time being."
With Hui Jun begging for mercy, the enraged emperor could only swallow his anger and order people to send Lu Huan to the side hall to give birth. Hui Jun heaved a sigh of relief and hurriedly stepped forward. She held Lu Huan's hand and whispered in her ear,
"If you want to live, you must give birth to this child. This is your last chance to turn things around." Lu Huan's eyes shone with disbelief. She did not believe that Hui Jun would actually help her. The two of them looked at each other. Lu Huan felt a throbbing pain in her stomach, causing her to have no energy to think about anything else. Basin after basin of bright red water was carried out from the side hall. The emperor's expression was gloomy, and Hui Jun was secretly prepared to watch a good show. It was unknown whether it was because Lu Huan's body was good, or the effects of the easy pregnancy pill. The birth seemed dangerous, but in less than 2 hours, 2 loud cries came from the side hall. The emperor had just relaxed when the terrified screams of the palace maids and midwives came from the side hall. There was even the sound of something falling to the ground. The emperor frowned. He did not know what had happened inside. Why was there such a big commotion? Hui Jun pinched her handkerchief and covered her mouth. She looked worried for Lu Huan, but in reality, she was gloating. She looked worried as if she had been frightened. She held the emperor's hand tightly. The emperor's anger had subsided a lot. He comforted her gently. "Don't be afraid. Demon? There's a demon." Screams and shouts of demon came from the side hall. The people outside were angry and worried. After a while, the midwife trembled as she carried a baby out. Her face was pale and bloodless. "What demon?" Hui Jun did not wait for the emperor to speak. She reprimanded the midwife. "How dare you be so presumptuous in front of an official?" The midwife's whole body was trembling. Her hands were shaking even more violently. Hui Jun stepped forward. Her expression was normal. "Let me take a look. An official's grandson is young." She lifted the baby's swaddle slightly. Instantly, her body stiffened and her face turned pale. No matter how brave she was still frightened when she saw this monster-like baby. The emperor saw her strange reaction and stepped forward. "Let me take a look." Only then did the midwife hand the baby out in shock. Only then did everyone see the strangeness of the baby. 2 heads were squeezed together. One child had no upper lip, and the other had no nose. They were clearly 2 children, but they only had 1 body. Not only that, the body had 4 legs and 4 arms. 8 legs were curled up in the swaddle. Everyone's scalp went numb and they broke out in a cold sweat. Everyone felt as if they had fallen into an ice cellar. How was this a baby? It was clearly a monster. The others screamed in fear. The emperor's reaction was even more direct. His expression was extremely ferocious. He panted like an ox and grabbed the swaddle. Before anyone could react, he threw the sleeping baby to the ground, making a dull sound. The 2 deformed babies did not even have time to scream. Blood was already seeping out of the ground. Huijuan's face was pale. Her eyelids fluttered, and she fell limply to the ground. The emperor was worried about Hui Jun. He hurriedly said, "Get rid of this demon." Then he carried her away. The emperor had left, and no one was left to take charge of the situation. No one could shut up the insiders. One could imagine that the news of the 4th princess consort giving birth to a demon would spread throughout the palace in an instant. If someone deliberately manipulated it, it would even spread out of the palace. The 2nd princess consort, Anyina, was also frightened. However, she soon revealed a malicious smile. When Hui Jun, who had fainted from fear, woke up, the shocking news had already spread throughout the streets. The people were in a panic. A demon baby had descended from the sky, and the disaster of war had arrived. This was a warning from the heavens. The current emperor had lost his virtue, so the royal family had given birth to a demon. By the time the emperor reacted, the news could no longer be hidden. It became more and more intense, and the rumors became more and more unpleasant. Under such circumstances, more and more aristocratic families surrendered to Prince Chongshou.
The emperor's temper became more irritable day by day. Fortunately, he had many hostages in his hands. Most aristocratic families did not dare to act rashly, so the situation in the capital was still stable. When the emperor was free, those who might have leaked the secret would be in trouble. They would either be secretly executed or locked up. Even the second princess consort, Anyina, did not get any benefits. The emperor ordered her to stay at home to reflect on herself and recite scriptures. She was not allowed to leave the residence without orders. As for the fourth princess consort, who had given birth to the demon baby, she had a massive postpartum hemorrhage and was forcibly killed. Chapter 468. When Lu Huan's corpse was sent to Prince Changshuo's military camp, he was discussing with his subordinates how to attack Qinzhou in spring. Report. The messenger's voice came from outside the tent. Prince Changshuo frowned impatiently and ordered the messenger to enter. What happened again? The messenger had a strange look on his face. He said hesitantly, Qinzhou sent a coffin, saying that the fourth princess consort is lying in it. What? Prince Changshuo stood up in shock. His eyes widened and he was furious. Who did you say is lying in the coffin? The messenger could only repeat carefully. According to the messenger, the fourth princess consort died from a blood hemorrhage during childbirth. In the next moment, a porcelain teacup exploded not far in front of him. Its fragments scattered all over the ground. That old bastard, he's too much. Prince Changshuo's chest rose and fell rapidly. His originally elegant and gentle face was flushed with anger, looking frighteningly ferocious. The military generals in the tent did not understand what had happened, but the quick-witted strategist sensed something different. By right, the fourth princess consort was the daughter of Chongzhou's Lu Shi. The fourth princess consort had died from a difficult childbirth. If anyone should be angry, it should be Lu Shi. After all, he was the proper father. What did this have to do with Prince Changshuo? The strategist's heart spun. A terrifying thought popped up in their minds. Could it be? What kind of secret relationship did the fourth princess consort have with their lord? Now that the fourth princess consort had a blood hemorrhage during childbirth, it was not a natural death, but a man-made one? Everyone secretly communicated with their eyes, silently passing on obscure information. Prince Changshuo's rationality was now dominated by anger. How could he have the energy to care if his subordinates were gossiping or daydreaming? He said, "Those people came to send the coffin. Did they leave any other message?" The messenger replied awkwardly, "Not at all." Prince Changshuo's aura relaxed. It was as if he had aged 10 years in an instant. But the anger in his heart was still growing. Although he did not care much about his daughter, Lu Huan, dying in his own hands and dying in the hands of the enemy were two completely different concepts. Not to mention that the person who killed Lu Huan was most likely his good second brother. The other party must have found out that Lu Huan was the daughter of him and that woman. He was jealous and wanted to kill Lu Huan. Thinking of this, Prince Changshuo's sparse benevolent heart sprouted, and his hatred towards the emperor deepened. After spring, we'll attack Qinzhou. The death of his daughter was absolutely irreconcilable. The strategists and generals in the tent did not understand what was going on, but Prince Changshuo's resolute aura made them excited. They all shouted, "Yes, Your Majesty!" In an instant, the tent was filled with a murderous aura. Prince Changshuo returned to his original position with a ferocious expression and said to the messenger, "I will write a letter later and immediately order someone to send the coffin along with the letter to Chongzhou. I will tell the Lu Prefecture magistrate the truth. Since his good second brother was courting death like this, then don't blame him for being ruthless and taking drastic measures. If he dared to do this, then he shouldn't blame his younger brother for retaliating." The strategists were secretly puzzled. After all, Prince Changshuo's reaction just now was rather strange. But if they disregarded this detail, they also understood one thing. Qinzhou had sufficient military strength and couldn't be conquered in a short time. If they could get Chongzhou's Lu Shi's help, the situation on the battlefield would instantly tilt towards their side. Based on various considerations, this matter was decided just like that. Little did they know that if Lu Shi received such a big gift, he would probably hide in his bed at night and laugh uncontrollably out loud. At the same time, far away in Chongzhou, Lu Shi was still living his simple life. Every day, he would either invite his friends to eat hot pot or roast meat. The variety of seasonings had conquered many potential foodies. Fortunately, Chongzhou and Xiangyang district had business dealings. Otherwise, according to Lu Shi's frequency, no amount of seasonings would be enough. Chongzhou was a small place at the border, but there were many reclusive masters living in seclusion. Eating roast meat and hot pot in a world of ice and snow, even the reclusive masters couldn't resist. As a matter of fact, today he had a sudden impulse to invite a new friend. The kitchen was still preparing the ingredients needed for the roast meat and hot pot. Lu Shi and his friend first played a game of chess to kill time. Magistrate, you seem to be in a good mood. Did something good happen this morning? Lu Shi twirled a chess piece and sat opposite the person opposite him. After a moment of deliberation, he carefully placed his piece and slightly reversed the situation. The situation was clearly disadvantageous for Lu Shi, but he still wore a smile that came from the bottom of his heart. This made the hermit opposite him curious. Either this person was broad-minded, didn't mind winning or losing, and enjoyed the thrill of the game. Or Lu Shi had encountered something good today, and it was a joyous occasion. After pondering for a while, the hermit analyzed Lu Shi's personality and felt that it was more likely that he had encountered something joyous. Lu Shi smiled and said, I woke up this morning to find a magpie at my door. Don't you think it's a good thing? The hermit secretly frowned, and his gaze fell on the thick snow in the courtyard. Would a magpie be at his door in this weather? Even though he thought so, he still congratulated Lu Shi. Since it's a magpie at your door, I think the good thing is near. Lu Shi smiled and said, Thank you for your auspicious words. Coincidentally, the situation on the chessboard had entered a critical moment of life and death, so the two stopped the topic. Lu Shi was indeed in a good mood. Calculating the time, the two deadly letters should have reached their master's hands by now. After many years of suffocation, he could finally hold his head high. How could he not be happy? The hatred of killing his wife and son, as long as he was alive, he would take revenge until the end. No matter the means. Lu Shi was not a good person by nature. When Gu Min was alive, she could restrain him, and he was happy to show his kindest side. Now that his beloved wife had passed away for many years, and the enemy who caused her death was still alive and kicking, Lu Shi had no more restraints, so he simply tore off this layer of disguise. He planned carefully and waited for the net to be pulled. Now, the results were beginning to show. Looking at the pure white snow outside the courtyard, Lu Shi sighed. When the bitter cold passed, it was early spring again, and the anniversary of Min's death was approaching. Lu Huan's life and the dynasty of Dongqing were the best sacrifices. Lu Shi smiled gently and sighed. It's so cold today. He let out a breath and slightly warmed his stiff and cold hands. The servants brought the hot pot and barbecue rack, and all kinds of spices and ingredients were placed on the short table. The hermit said, Auspicious snow indicates a fruitful year. I hope there will be a big harvest next year. No matter what happened outside, at least within the borders of Chongzhou, it was still peaceful. The people could look forward to next year's autumn harvest. We will. It was already the middle of winter. Although this year was a year of great disaster, the new year was an old tradition. Chapter 469. There was a creature that worked overtime when others were at work, worked overtime when others celebrated holidays, worked overtime when others were on vacation, worked overtime when others were picking up girls, getting married and preparing to have children, but he was still working overtime. Looking for him in the crowd, suddenly looking back, he was still working overtime. If they went to the Xiangyang district headquarters to look for this kind of creature, they could find a few of them. After working overtime for a long time, even the most diligent subordinates would feel resentful. Especially when the Lord was fishing in troubled waters and her subordinates were exhausted. Ever since Zixiao recovered a little and took over the work, the Lord's slacking has become even better. Qiguan sighed softly. As the end of the year approached, various matters piled up like a mountain, but his immediate superior was always neglecting her duties. What made him happy was that his new colleague Wei Ci seemed cold and aloof, but was actually gentle and kind, capable of working, and did not like to talk much. What made him resentful was that his lord was slacking every day. In the past, she would come to the government office to pretend to be busy, but now she was nowhere to be seen. Xueqi laid on the heavy bamboo slips without a care for his image, his eyes half open weakly. He had used an entire box of ink ingots to mark documents these few days. If this went on, there would not be enough ink ingots. After these few days of work, the Lord said to give me a long vacation, 7 days in total. Why do I feel that maybe there are only 7 days of rest throughout the year? Hearing that, Xueqi raised his eyebrows and said bluntly, I don't believe a word that the Lord says. Xueqi was stunned for a moment, then he slowly climbed up from the pile of documents, sat up straight, and complained seriously, That's exactly what I was thinking. She had been fooled by empty promises too many times. Jiang Pengji's credibility had long been ruined. Even her subordinates did not believe her. Wei Ci wanted to laugh, but he had to hold it in. His throat felt a little itchy. He could only clench his fist against his lips, and small coughs overflowed from the corners of his lips. After a few light coughs, he felt better and said, It's still all right now, next year. Cough cough. I'm afraid it will be even more difficult. His slender and beautiful eyebrows furrowed. Others looked at him and were worried for him, wishing they could help him cough out that breath. Wei Ci was a quiet person, but if he sincerely wanted to build a good relationship with someone, very few people would dislike him. Even someone as vigilant as Xueqi had now completely accepted Wei Ci, and the two of them had a pleasant interaction at work. Smart teammates were always more likable than dumb teammates. Seeing how tired Wei Ci was, Xueqi heart softened a little. He said, I see that you're coughing badly. Do you want to rest for a while? The corners of Wei Ci's lips curled up slightly. He smiled and said, It's nothing. It's just an old illness. I'll be fine after this harsh winter. When Xueqi saw that he did not seem to be forcing himself, he felt slightly relieved and turned his attention to another matter. Did you just say that the annual meeting will be even busier? Wei Ci nodded. Everyone knew that Jiang Pengji wanted to deal with the Tsingyi army in Fengyi County after the beginning of spring, but he felt that her words could not be trusted, at least not completely. She always did whatever she wanted. Whoever provoked her, she would send troops to beat them. She did not care about the rules at all. Next year, she would probably fight from the beginning of the year to the end. Looking at the current situation, Prince Changshu and the Emperor are facing each other across the river. I'm afraid there will be a bitter battle after early spring next year. No matter who wins or loses, the whole of Dongqing will fall into a state of chaos where various regions are divided. When that time comes, all sorts of evildoers will emerge. We can only blame. Cough cough. The Lord has governed Xiangyang district too well. Even if she doesn't send troops to provoke us, there will be people who are jealous and come to us to ask for a beating. There was a trace of pity in Wei Ci's eyes. Of course, according to Jiang Pengji's character, even if people did not come to us to ask for a beating, she would have an excuse to visit their houses. Xueqi expression froze. Xueqi's reaction was even more intense. He almost lost his grip on the ink ingot. He looked at Wei Ci with some resentment and said, Can you pretend that you don't know about this? Wei Ci's expression froze. He immediately burst into laughter, revealing a stunning smile. Sure. From Wei Ci's point of view, the Lord in this life was much better than the previous one. In this life, she would at least take care of construction and slow down the pace of war. In the previous life, she only cared about territory, okay? If Xueqi and the rest knew what the Lord in the previous life was like, wouldn't they pull out their swords and commit suicide, praying that they would never work overtime again in their next life? Wei Ci thought of that scene and the corners of his lips involuntarily curled up. Xueqi muttered, When the Lord has completely established her foothold next year, I wonder if she can publish a list to recruit talents. If they did not recruit more people, he felt that the few of them would die of exhaustion at the desk. Wei Ci furrowed his brows and thought about it. He said regretfully, It's not the time yet. If the list is published, I'm afraid that the Lord will become the target of public criticism. I have some friends that I have a good relationship with. The Lord also has some friendship with them. When the time comes, I'll write a letter to them and ask if they are willing to come. Xueqi's eyes lit up. How could he forget? Since Wei Ci was the last disciple of Master Yuanjing, his connections were definitely not weak. If he cast a wide net, he would definitely be able to catch a few fat fish. Xueqi thought about it more comprehensively and added a sentence. It's best to have a simple background. Wei Ci understood and nodded in agreement. Among Jiang Pengji's current team, except for Feng Jin, the others did not have a high background. Their backgrounds were also relatively simple, and the conflicts of interests involved were also very small. This was very beneficial for the initial development and internal unity. If not for the earthquake in Dongqing, Feng Jin might not have fallen into Jiang Pengji's hands. His participation was completely unexpected. Fortunately, Feng Jin was open-minded and transparent. He was a true benevolent gentleman. He was neither as rigid as the sons of the aristocratic families, nor did he have the bad temper of the aristocratic families. He got along well with Jiang Pengji's subordinates. They were even more coordinated when it came to work. Until now, there had been no disagreements or other conflicts. Everyone discussed things in moderation. If someone unfamiliar and difficult to get along with came, Xueqi would really worry about the internal unity. Wei Ci wanted to help Jiang Pengji ascend the throne again, not to drag her down. Naturally, he would be very careful in this aspect. It was just like in her previous life. At the beginning, there were no literati around her that she could use. It could be said that she started from the grassroots. When she had a little foundation, there were also aristocratic families that wanted to plot against her. They took the initiative to attach themselves to her, but secretly tried to take away her power. Reality proved that doing so was no different from provoking the King of Hell. It was precisely after this incident that she did not care about those who came to her door. She preferred those who were captured. This created an interesting phenomenon. In the early days of Jiang dynasty's founding, except for a group of military generals, 80% of the strategists were all captured. They all had a previous lord. Their previous bosses were all beheaded by her with one stroke of the knife. As for these defeated people, they either followed her to create a new dynasty or pulled out their swords and committed suicide. She was domineering and willful. She did not give them a third choice at all. However, Wei Ci liked her willful and carefree manner. He was infatuated and admired her. It required great courage and determination to reforge the divine cauldrons of the 9 provinces and unify the broken lands. Chapter 470. Wei Ci held the hot water in his arms tightly. Heat was slowly transmitted into his body, dispelling the lingering chill. He coughed lightly and said, "Coincidentally, I have a friend with me. I'll ask for his opinion later." "That friend is in Xiangyang district?" Xueqi eyes brightened. If he had a godly teammate like Wei Ci, his workload would be greatly reduced. Wei Ci smiled and said, "Shiheng and I came to Xiangyang district together." Zhang Ping's obsession with the mechanism and neglect of government affairs were quite similar to his lord's temperament. Xueqi raised his eyebrows and gave Wei Ci a meaningful look. "Brother, well done." "Achoo!" The flying wadding tickled Zhang Ping's nose. He couldn't help but sneeze. Zhang Ping held the hot water in his arms and wrapped his clothes tightly. There was a lot of cut wood piled in front of him. The water wheel. Something seems wrong. Which part is wrong? Or is there a problem with the block structure? Zhang Ping's nimble fingers dismantled the installed water wheel. After a while, he realized that the hot water in his arms was no longer hot. It was worth it to get up and change the water again. When he opened the door, he realized that the sky outside had already turned yellow. He had unknowingly wasted an entire afternoon? He rubbed his stomach, feeling a little hungry. After taking some money, Zhang Ping wrapped his cloak tightly and went out to buy food against the wind and snow. Wei Ci had his breakfast, lunch and dinner at the district headquarters. Zhang Ping and Dian Yan could only think of their own ways. They didn't know how to cook, so they went to the nearby eateries to buy. When the new year comes, I'm afraid the eateries will close. I really have to buy a maid who can cook and do laundry. As a handicraft expert, Zhang Ping's ability to take care of himself was somewhat poor. It was inexplicably bleak to think about it. Little did he know that there was a more miserable future waiting for him. 2 flowers bloomed, one on each side. Dian Yan and a group of bandits were successfully recruited into the military camp by relying on their skills. They thought that beautiful days were coming, and they would be able to settle down in Xiangyang district. Never would he have thought that they were playing winter training. Before the sky had even brightened, they had to be ready for morning training. They had to run all over the mountains with heavy weights on their backs in the dead of winter. It was said that this was the most basic training. Once they got used to it, they would increase the training load. Dian Yan's huge stature was very conspicuous in the crowd. Coupled with his good performance, he was quickly noticed by others. The person who noticed him was none other than Jiang Pengji, whom Xueqi had criticized for slacking off. She was wearing a thin brown shirt, revealing her fair wrists and slender ankles. The audience in the live broadcast room felt cold for her, but she acted as if nothing had happened. She crossed her arms in front of her chest and followed Li Yun to inspect the new recruits. That tall one is not bad. He's a good material. Li Yun saw that she was referring to Jian Yan and nodded in agreement. The training load is relatively heavy. Many people complain incessantly and even throw tantrums. Very few people can keep their composure, and he is one of them. When it came to serious matters, Li Yun had always been serious and steady. There was not a trace of naivety. Why don't you call him over for a test, my lord? Leading troops to war was the job of military generals. Currently, only Meng Hun, Luo Yu and Li Yun were capable generals. Jiang Pengji could barely be considered a lord, but her subordinates did not want her to always take the lead and take risks. At present, she still had sufficient manpower. When the territory expanded and the battle line lengthened, this number of people would not be enough. It was important to prepare for a rainy day. It was important to start looking for suitable candidates or nurture talents early. Jiang Pengji chewed on a wild grass root in her mouth. She looked sloppy. There's no need. Let's continue watching. Li Yun nodded. The two of them continued to stand at the edge of the call, observing the performance of the new recruits. After a while, the sergeant finally relented and said that they should rest. Hundreds of soldiers looked as if their bones had been extracted. They were so tired that they sat on the ground, panting heavily. Even if the cold wind was biting, they still felt like they were in a furnace. They were sweating profusely. Dian Yen stood at the same spot for a while. When his breathing was smooth, he followed the others and sat on the ground to rest. His action, in addition to his height, was very conspicuous among the whole group of new recruits. Jiang Pengji's eyes were filled with praise. She paid more attention to Jian Yan. Not bad indeed. The sergeant in charge of training the new recruits was selected from the troops. They treated the new recruits equally. However, they would be more biased and pay more attention to the new recruits who performed well. Which instructor wouldn't like someone like Dian Yan who listened attentively and paid attention to the training procedures? Because of this fondness, when the new soldiers were resting and eating, Dian Yan received an extra egg in his food, and a spoonful of gravy was poured into the plain porridge. Just the smell alone was enough to make people's stomachs rumble. He didn't care about the envious or jealous gazes of the people around him. He buried his head in the porridge and ate. He didn't care that the plain porridge was a little hot. He carefully finished the whole bowl of porridge. When the warm porridge entered his stomach, his entire body emitted a lazy and comfortable warmth from the inside out. He was about to send the bowl back when he heard the discussion of the other new recruits. The content of the conversation touched on his sensitive nerves. Have you heard? There are women here. A new recruit whispered to the new recruit beside him. Although it was said to be a whisper, the people around them could hear them. Women? The person revealed a look of disbelief. He immediately sneered. Even if there are, it's the people above them who enjoy it. There were no women in the military camp. Even if there were women, they would be serving the troops. In the day, they would wash clothes and cook. In the evening, they would receive and send people off. Dian Yan's heart was burning. He couldn't believe that the district had such a bad habit. Immediately, his eyes revealed a fierce glint. His fierce expression made people's hearts tremble. He asked the two of them, "Is what you said true?" The two new recruits heard the voice and raised their heads. Seeing Dian Yan's expression, they both burst into laughter. They thought that Dian Yan was thinking of women. Of course it's true. The district headquarters is recruiting female soldiers. This is something that the entire district knows. Who wants to go? Jiang Pengji's hearing was amazing. Hearing the commotion, she couldn't help but frown slightly. Previously, they had decided to recruit 500 to 600 female soldiers. But in the end, only a little more than 100 were willing to come. They were all skinny and weak girls. Most of them had lost their parents and were forced to come by their grandparents or other relatives. When they came to register, each of them cried uncontrollably. Their unwillingness made Jiang Pengji a little angry. Her female camp wasn't a garbage collection station. It couldn't accept all kinds of trash. Now that she saw it, she found the source. I say, did they misunderstand something? Jiang Pengji pinched her chin. A cold smile hung on the corner of her lips. She said to Li Yun, "Do these idiots think that I built the female camp to give them a cycle of enjoyment, To relieve their desires, and to vent their beastly nature?
TSK TSK. Li Yun wisely chose to remain silent. Chapter 471. Little match that sells girls. F***CK. These wretched B***stards are too F***king disgusting. Jean Tian wooging you. It's more than disgusting, I feel like vomiting. Women eat their rice. Can women only sleep with men when they enter the military camp? Are there no heroines in the history of their side? The expressions of those two were so wretched. Even if they were just fantasizing, I feel disgusted for the girls in the female camp. I can't have fun anymore. Sofa is Xianggu. Yes, it's so disgusting. Streamer, you must not let these people off so easily. I'm waiting for you to slap them in the face. Shuashu and Little Pudding, I think we can't really blame these men for being wretched. It's normal for them to have perverted thoughts because of the general atmosphere. I went to Baidu to look up some ancient information and found that it's common to bring women to the military camp. They are the so-called camp prostitutes. They usually do odd jobs, and if the war is tense, they'll be pushed to the battlefield. If the war goes well, they'll become prostitutes to serve the male soldiers. Ginseng Kuwei. Even so, I still feel extremely uncomfortable. The streamer established the female camp to let these women follow the army to war, to build up their careers, to raise their status, so that people can no longer look down on them. Before the official start, their comrades were already fantasizing. It was as if they had eaten a fly. Zhang Pengji calmly multitasked. She paid attention to the situation below and looked at the comments on the streaming interface. At that moment, she heard Li Yun's slightly suppressed and unhappy voice. This matter cannot be dragged on. If we don't explain it clearly, the reputation of the female camp will be ruined. Displeasure flashed in Li Yun's eyes. He truly hated those who were irresponsible and liked to joke around with the reputation of women. Such behavior was too lowly. According to the Lord's narration, the female camp would be heroines who would go to the battlefield and kill the enemy. In troubled times, Li Yun believed that anyone who dared to stand up and fight could be called a hero. When these wretched people mentioned the female camp, they would think of such things. It was simply disgusting. However, these foolish people didn't feel ashamed but proud. Li Yun felt that these people were not worthy of being men. They had no breadth of mind and bearing. They couldn't even be called an upright man. Fame isn't something given by others. You have to earn it with your own hands. Zhang Pengji sneered as she looked at the new recruits. She had a wicked idea. Since they think that there's nothing good in the female battalion, I'll let the female soldiers of the female battalion teach them how to behave. They'll kneel on the ground and swallow their words. She wanted to build a female battalion, so she definitely couldn't get involved in these messy things. Before the enemy could recognize the strength of the female battalion, they had to recognize their own people first. The previous troops had all seen Nongqin's strength, so no one dared to be rude to the female troops. However, these newly recruited soldiers and the Imperial Guards were different. Zhang Pengji narrowed her eyes dangerously as she thought of a plan. There was nothing more powerful than a fist to make them submit. So what if she was a woman? She could still beat up these new recruits and make them roll on the ground. After hearing her words, Li Yun rummaged through the information on the female troops in his mind. It seemed that none of them could fight. However, if you want to convince people with strength, there doesn't seem to be anyone in the female battalion who can do it. Li Yun furrowed his brows. The best way to make these new recruits shut up was to have a fight. However, the leader of the female troops, Jiang Nongqin, who could fight, was not in Xiangyang district. Where could he find a suitable person now?
Zhang Pengji said. There will be one soon. Finishing her sentence, she said to the soldier at the side. Go to the female battalion and borrow a set of female soldiers' clothes. For the convenience of training, regardless of male or female soldiers, their clothes were extremely loose. Every set of clothes was equipped with many ropes. These ropes were used to tie the cuffs of the sleeves and adjust the size of the clothes. Therefore, even if Zhang Pengji's figure was taller than the average woman, the clothes she brought could still be worn. Looking at the clothes, Li Yun suddenly said, My lord, Yun can't disguise as a woman with this appearance.
Zhang Pengji was dumbfounded. What? The audience in the streaming room was the first to react. Immediately, they laughed heartily. Bailu Heshabi, I can't take it anymore. I'm dying of laughter.
Brother Liyun's imagination is too wild. Does he think the streamer wants him to disguise as a woman to teach those new soldiers a lesson? Pfft, to be honest, I'm really looking forward to seeing Brother Liyun in female clothing. It'll definitely be a different experience. Which artist will paint a portrait of him in female clothing? Xian Chao Xian Yuan Yuan. Brother Liyun looks too manly. If he wants muscles, he has muscles. If he wants to be a man, he has the guts of a man. If he wears women's clothes, people will recognize him instantly. However, his facial features are really good. If he were to dress up a little, it's not impossible to look at him in female clothing. Meng Zhu Ling Chong Yuan. If any family's daughter looks like this, it won't do. It's a little hard on the eyes. Jiang Pengji also felt that Liyun's imagination was a little hard on the eyes. How did he come up with such a conclusion? She almost ridiculed his incompetence. Even if I'm blind, I know you can't look at you in female clothing. Liyun's face blushed slightly. Only then did he realize that he had misunderstood. His lord did not want him to disguise as a woman. However, if it wasn't him, then who could it be? After looking around, his gaze fell on Jiang Pengji and he asked, "Could it be that my lord wants to disguise as a woman and prepare to enter the arena personally?" Jiang Pengji nodded. "Yes, I'll teach them a lesson. It'll be best if I beat them until their legs turn to jelly at the sight of a woman." After saying that, she revealed a wicked smile. The audience felt a chill in their hearts and had an ominous premonition. Liyun took a step back and looked carefully. Then he said, This won't do." Jiang Pengji raised her brows and said, "Why won't it do? I can defeat those soft-footed shrimps below with one hand." Liyun shook his head and said with extreme honesty, "My lord, if such a stalwart man disguises as a woman, I won't look as good as him." The atmosphere suddenly became quiet. In the next second, the bullet screen in the streaming room exploded again. Everyone lined up to mock Jiang Pengji. Buxiang jogging Xixiangxi. Let me tell you a joke, the streamer is a stalwart man. He won't look as good as Liyun in female clothing. Jin Tian Inzai jogging. The streamer who disguises as a man is going to disguise as a woman. Is she a man or a woman? Zaitai Mengzhu. Ha 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 ha, I'm dying of laughter. This streaming room is simply toxic. Xianggu Liangyao keyboard. Young brother Liyun is too honest. Such honest boys usually don't live long. Ming Tian jogging. Young brother Liyun, be careful. You've offended the narrow-minded streamer. Jiang Pengji took the female camp uniform and raised her head to look at Liyun. She chuckled happily. Chapter 472. Jiang Pengji said, "I'm going to change. Keep an eye on the people below. Don't let them cause trouble." Liyun nodded. He regained his solemn and cold expression. He began to keep an eye on them with a heavy expression. Down below, the new recruit Dian Yan's heart was burning with rage. He stood up for the women in the village. He had no choice but to lead the men in the village to fight against the Tsing-Yi army. In the end, his family was destroyed and he ended up as a bandit. It could be said that he hated the existence of prostitutes in the camp the most among all the new recruits. Such an organization should not exist. The military camp was originally a place for hot-blooded men to build their careers and rest on the battlefield. How could there be such a disgusting deal in the dark? Perhaps Dian Yan's reaction made the two recruits unhappy, as one of them opened his mouth to speak. "Hey, what are your eyes doing? Why are you staring at me like that?" Dian Yan questioned, "Do you know who the so-called prostitutes in the camp are?" The new recruit replied nonchalantly, "Of course they're all indecent women. Do you, a black-faced man, want to have tender and protective feelings for the fairer sex? It's not that I want to criticize you, but look at how poor and ugly you are. If you were outside, you wouldn't even be able to hold a woman's hand. Now you're here to care about this nonsense." Dian Yan suppressed his anger. His voice deepened. Many of the prostitutes in the camp are innocent women and children. They were captured by force. The new recruit was unhappy. He straightened his neck and retorted, "What's wrong with you, you blockhead? Are you deliberately looking for trouble? I don't care how those women came here. Whether they were captured or kidnapped, it has nothing to do with me." The new recruit stood up. His voice suddenly became louder. It attracted the attention of others. He continued, "If you can control yourself,
Don't go there to seek pleasure. Just mind your own business. Do you think you're a saint? Another recruit nearby opened his mouth and said to Jian Yen, the girls in the women's camp were not captured, nor were they snatched. They came willingly after the district headquarters issued an announcement. They volunteered to serve men in the military camp. Brother, don't bother too much. The district magistrate sympathizes with us and feels that we have worked hard, so he specially prepared those delicate girls for us. Just enjoy quietly and don't deliberately cause trouble. Originally, Dian Yen still had some hope, but now he had completely given up. Why would Xiangyang district, which appeared bright and beautiful on the surface, brazenly set up a brothel? One of the recruits laughed. That's right, don't stir up trouble. Otherwise, you'll be in for a treat. With the brothel, we can go and have some fun even if we're bored. Look at you, I'm afraid you're still a virgin. When the time comes, we brothers will bring you to experience it. You will understand the taste of a woman in the future. The recruits did not even notice the conflicted expression on the sergeant in charge of their training. The new recruit was really bold. He actually said that the women's camp was a brothel camp? It's a pity that Maiden Jiang isn't here. Otherwise, she could teach these kids a lesson. According to the higher-ups, Lady Jiang will bring the troops from Hejian County to meet up. They should leave after the new year. If everything goes well, they can arrive in about a month. The troops used to look down on women, but now they dared not do so, especially the female troops. They did not dare to provoke them. Otherwise, they would end their family line in minutes. Their attacks were sinister, and their methods were shocking. To be honest, if not for training, they all thought they would be hacked to death by the other party. Once a man was touched by those women, he would definitely be at a disadvantage. Kicking the crotch, stabbing the eye, striking the throat, breaking the bone, bending the finger, kicking the ankle, stabbing the heart. Not only were their moves sinister, but they were also so fast that there was no time to block. To be honest, even these well-trained men did not dare to be so dirty. These people probably did not expect that the women's camp would be even more slippery in the future. They're still too young, Sai. The sergeant sighed softly. His eyes were filled with the expression of watching a good show. He never expected that there would still be female soldiers who could teach these new recruits how to behave without Jiang Nongqin around. Dian Yan's heart was filled with anger and disappointment. His rough face carried a strong sense of hostility. The new recruits thought that Dian Yan wanted to fight with them. One by one, they could not help but stand up and shrink into the crowd. After all, Dian Yan was too tall. He had a natural advantage over them. What do you want? If you dare to cause trouble here, be careful of being thrown out. Dian Yan laughed coldly. Just as he was about to say that he did not care about staying there, a clear voice came from behind him. Which little bastard is spouting nonsense here, saying that the women's camp is a brothel camp? All of you stand out. Dian Yan turned his head in search of the voice. He saw a tall and well-proportioned girl standing not far away. She held a wooden spear in her hand, and a cold and disdainful smile hung on her fair face. She looked at them coldly. She did not come with good intentions. Dian Yan immediately sensed the hostility from her and subconsciously took a step back. The others did not notice. Instead, they curiously craned their necks to look at the female soldiers from the women's camp. Li Yun had been paying attention to the situation. When he saw Jiang Pengji appear, he almost spat. Could it be that his lord's so-called cross-dressing was just a change of clothes and a clean woman's hair? Was she applying makeup on her eyebrows and lips? Did she come out with her face bare? What about the flesh on her chest? Where were they? Li Yun secretly glanced at his lord's chest. It was flat. However, if his lord changed into women's clothes and tied up her hair in a slightly feminine bun, it would really be a little interesting. At least, if someone was a little blind, they might mistakenly think that his lord was a woman. Li Yun commented from the side, waiting for his lord to sweep the new recruits. Oh, this is a young lady. Seeing Jiang Pengji's attitude, some of the new recruits were terrified. However, there were always some who were extremely daring and insisted that the women's camp was a brothel camp. There was no need to respect the women in the brothel camp. Anyway, they lay on the bed and served men. Even though Jiang Pengji's aura was extraordinary, not only were they not afraid, they had indescribable thoughts. All right. Maiden insists that the women's camp is not a brothel camp. Then let's change the name. What do you think? Jiang Pengji curled her lips.
Under the control of her nimble fingers, she spun the wooden spear in her hand.
Nothing.
As soon as she finished speaking, the wooden spearhead, under her control, slapped the other party across the face.
You bitch, how can you hit me?
Her attack was too sudden, and the recruit was caught off guard. He raised his hand to wipe his mouth, and blood came out.
He licked his teeth with his tongue. They were a little loose. Jiang Pengji smiled gently, but she said, "Not only am I going to beat you, I'm going to beat you until you can't get up." It had always been Jiang Pengji's style to start a fight at the slightest disagreement. She would not wait for the other party to get into position before making a move.
The wooden spear in her hand was as dexterous as her own arm. Wherever she pointed, the spear's shadow would almost turn into a shadow.
The recruit was only stunned for a moment before he was hit a few times. He rolled on the ground in pain.
After fighting for a while, Jiang Pengji said to the others, "Who thinks that the women's camp is a brothel camp?" A few of the recruits saw that she was so arrogant, and couldn't help but get angry.
Isn't it?
It was originally a brothel camp.
Chapter 473. The recruits were also hooligans.
Their skin was as thick as the city wall, and they were not stingy at all.
When they heard Jiang Pengji ask if they needed to be F***ked, a few of them whistled frivolously and presumptuously.
Ha ha ha.
Did you hear that?
This little girl asked if I needed to be F***ked.
The recruit laughed arrogantly, and his mouth was full of dirty words. He stared at Jiang Pengji's face and body with a pair of sneaky eyes.
He opened his chest and said, "I need to be F***ked.
Little girl, do you want to F***ck me here?" The streamer was flirted with. The audience in the streaming room was so angry that they wanted to smash their keyboards.
To me da lao, F***ck, this damn hooligan dares to fantasize about my streamer.
I'll beat him to death with my shoehorn.
Xueqi, where are the 150,000 live streaming brothers? Follow me and drown this idiot with your spit.
Jinri Wuging,
I can't stand it.
The streamer is my goddess. Where did this idiot come from? How dare he flirt with my goddess?
If I don't cut off his descendant, he won't know how powerful I am.
Streamer, don't be afraid. Hit him in the face.
If he dies, I'll take responsibility."
Compared to the audience's agitated emotions, Jiang Pengji did not react. Her expression was still cold, but her eyes were a little dangerous. She said, "TSK, then you have to hold on. Don't say no halfway."
After she finished speaking, the wooden spear in her hand rushed forward like lightning. The body of the spear moved in an arc and slid past the corner of the opponent's eye. Pa! The spear bounced back and swept across. Before the opponent could react, the left side of his face was already swollen.
Block, grab, slide, pick, twist.
The dense shadows of the spear blocked all the opponent's escape routes. She was brave and vigorous, and the continuous attacks hit the opponent's body like a drizzle. In a short while, his head was swollen several times. The opponent could only hold his head with both hands and beg for mercy. Jiang Pengji's wooden spear swept and flicked, and the body fell backward like a kite with a broken string. He rolled in a circle and was dizzy. In the end, he ate a mouthful of fine sand and gravel.
2 new recruits were knocked to the ground by Jiang Pengji.
The audience already had the intention to retreat. They secretly regretted their cheap mouths. Jiang Pengji laughed and mocked. "Tisktase, are there only a few pieces of trash in the new recruit camp?" She rarely showed her anger on her face, but that didn't mean she wasn't angry. She was just thinking about how to take revenge. In some ways, she was no narrower than the point of a needle.
"Bitch, who are you calling trash?"
The other recruits were also fired at, and they were furious. The angry recruits basically agreed that the women's camp was a brothel camp. A few recruits hid at the edge, far away from the battle, so as not to get caught up in it.
Jian Yan's eyes brightened.
Jiang Pengji's posture of easily defeating the 2 new recruits amazed him. His favorable impression of her skyrocketed. "Why don't you go outside and ask if the women's camp is a brothel camp? You said it's a brothel, and you even gave me face. Don't be so shameless."
"That's right.
War has always been a matter for men. Do you really think that by joining the women's camp, you're really helping others fight?"
What a joke.
Either you obediently stay here and serve men, or you obediently go home and serve men. Do you really think that by playing with a gun, you can go to the battlefield in the future? Don't worry. We brothers will take care of your business in the future. We'll let you understand what a women's camp is. Jiang Pengji acted as if she didn't hear him. She used the tip of her foot to push the recruit's head away, revealing a swollen and bruised pig face. She said sarcastically, "Didn't you say that you're quite durable? You can't take it anymore?" The recruit felt pain all over his body. He couldn't even get up. He felt extremely humiliated. Jiang Pengji raised her face coldly. She said, "In a place like the battlefield, there are only the living and the dead. I've never heard of men and women. You weaklings, you don't even have 2 tails of meat, and you still want to go to the battlefield to kill the enemy? Why don't we change the new recruit camp to a female camp? You don't need to huff and puff and crawl to the battlefield. Just obediently lie on the bed and properly serve your brothers and sisters. It'll save you trouble, worry, and effort. What do you think of this suggestion?" Damn it! Li Yun almost choked on his own saliva. The audience in the streaming room cheered and jumped in joy. "Streamer, your ability to shoot the map has improved to the next level." When a few sergeants saw this, they wanted to step forward and stop her, but Li Yun stopped them. "Don't go up. Just continue watching." What a joke. Their lord seemed to be having a good time. If someone were to go up and disturb her, wouldn't that be looking for trouble? The sergeants looked at them worriedly. Their hearts were filled with worry. This. Brother Li Yun, if we don't do anything, will they cause trouble? The higher-ups had given them the job of teaching the recruits. This was a great trust. They all wanted to do their best. According to the words of Chief Instructor Meng Hun, if they taught the recruits well, not only would they be promoted, but they would also be freed from their slave status. Moreover, they would maintain the troop structure and their original treatment would not change. Such a good thing, all the sergeants almost broke their heads fighting for it. The other rewards were secondary. Being freed from their slave status was the most attractive. As their lord's troops, they enjoyed very good treatment. Everyone wished they could sacrifice their lives for their lord. However, troops were also a type of domestic slave. They were registered as slaves. In the future, when they got married, their descendants would also be registered as slaves. They didn't have to think for themselves, but they had to think for their future generations. Hearing such a good thing, which troop wouldn't be moved? After a fierce internal competition, they stood out as the cream of the crop. They suffered the envy and jealousy of their comrades. They treasured this opportunity very much. One by one, they trained the recruits with the strictest attitude, training them to the point of death. Seeing that the results were good, something like this had to happen at this critical juncture. Seeing the worried expressions of the sergeants, Li Yun's cold expression softened slightly. There was a hint of warmth in it. "Don't worry. That female soldier was my lord disguised as a woman. Her purpose was to teach these fellows a lesson." Li Yun's words revealed the secret of the heavens. The few corporals and instructors were stunned speechless. That arrogant female soldier was actually my lord disguised as a woman? Needless to say, when my lord dressed as a woman, she did look a little valiant and heroic. The way she beat them up just now was also very straightforward. Li Yun said, "Let's just wait and see the show." The sergeants' hearts relaxed. Instantly, they were overjoyed. There was even a hint of schadenfreude. "We'll listen to Brother Li Yun and watch the show from the side." Their lord had worked hard to facilitate the construction of the female troop. Now, she was creating a female battalion. It was obvious how determined his lord was. But now, there were people who didn't have eyes and were rushing to make trouble for his lord. They were disagreeing with him. Chapter 474. The recruits were mocked by Jiang Pengji. They were so angry that their faces turned green. They raised their hands to grab her and beat her to death. Jiang Pengji's lips curled into a joyful smile. She moved her feet and dodged sideways. Her right hand pinched the vital part of the opponent's wrist. She suddenly pulled it down and kneed him. The man cried out in pain. Jiang Pengji moved her body and kicked him into the crowd. He knocked into a few new soldiers along the way. The wooden spear in her hand slid nimbly. She dodged sideways and lightly struck a person's wrist, sweeping across the area. The body of the wooden spear bounced off the swarming enemies. It was obviously a light wooden spear, but when it landed on them, it was as if they were hit by a heavy boulder. Their bodies involuntarily tilted backward and they lost their center of gravity. The wooden spear bounced back along with the force. Jiang Pengji continuously struck with her spear. She struck several people's lower back with lightning speed. Their muscles were temporarily paralyzed and they could not stand up. It was as if she had eyes on her back. She agilely dodged the sneak attack from behind. She slid her spear and swept across her back. Pa! Pa! Almost all of them hit their faces, leaving a thick red mark. A recruit shouted in the chaos. "Stop the wooden spear in this woman's hand." Yes, without the weapon in her hand. Could she ascend to the heavens? Hearing this, Li Yun could not help but cover his face with his hands. He was not the one who said that even if she wanted to die, she should not do so. Li Yun was very clear about his Longjuan spear technique. She even learned some of her techniques from him. Therefore, Li Yun was very clear that his Langjun had never learned spear techniques before. At most, she only knew a little. She only relied on her battle instincts to use the weapon in her hand. Whether it was a spear or a halberd, to her, it was just a weapon. It was a medium used to hurt people. In essence, there was no difference. Simply put, the wooden spear restricted the development of her strength. Without the wooden spear, these new soldiers would only kneel down even more decisively. This was because his lord was born with divine strength. Her strength could lift a cauldron and chase a tiger across a ravine. Did they really think that masters wielded weapons to increase their strength? Hee, it could be self-sealing. The recruits rushed towards Jiang Pengji's wooden spear. She simply abandoned it and fought with her bare hands. Li Yun raised his hand and pinched the space between his brows. He turned his body to the side and avoided the battle. He could not bear to watch. The battle was completely one-sided. The sergeants seemed to have returned to their youth. They were once fortunate enough to be abused by their lord like this, and their hearts were filled with sorrow. Ugh! A fist smashed into his nose, producing a dull thud. The bridge of his nose slanted to one side, and 2 streams of blood flowed out of his nostrils. Jiang Pengji grabbed his collar with one hand and his belt with the other. She easily lifted him up and threw him into the crowd. Qu'est-ce, if I don't show them what I'm made of, these recruits will still want to overturn the heavens. Bang! Bang bang! Apart from the muffled sounds of fists and kicks hitting flesh, the recruits' wails and groans were endless. "Madam, please spare me. I won't dare to do it again. Please spare my life. Madam. I will never say that the women's camp is a brothel again. I won't say it even if you beat me to death. Please spare my life. Woo. Don't hit me anymore. Great aunt. I'm calling you great grandmother. I won't hit you anymore. Woo, I'm blind. I shouldn't have said such nonsense. Madam, just treat me as a fart and let me go." They felt pain after being beaten up. One by one, they cried and begged for mercy. But what was the use of begging for mercy now? If begging for mercy worked, why would she still need her fists? What did you say just now that you shouldn't have? Swallow it all back now. Jiang Pengji smiled coldly and said, "With your abilities, you still want to touch the women's camp? When you're on the battlefield, can you still straighten your legs and charge forward? I repeat, there are only the dead and the living on the battlefield. There are no men or women. The women's camp can still make contributions and fight on the battlefield. What about you? When the wind blows, you're like a dog. When the wind blows, you betray your comrades. Your legs run faster than anyone else. At this time, your backbone, your arrogance, and your courage to talk nonsense here have all been fed to the dogs." The recruits were in so much pain that they cried. They lay on the ground and could not get up. They had no idea how Jiang Pengji beat them up. Wherever she hit, it was as if they were paralyzed. Jiang Pengji, a girl, had practically challenged the entire recruit camp. A group of men had lost their dignity to their ancestors. Jiang Pengji clicked her tongue and did not look at the recruits. She turned to the sergeants and said, "Did you all see it?" The sergeants tensed up and quickly straightened their bodies, their backs as straight as a pen. They answered in unison, "We all saw it clearly." Jiang Pengji's face was solemn and her eyes were sharp. "I think these people not only lack grass, but they also lack training. I think the training in the recruit camp is still too little. That's why they have so much free time and energy to gossip everywhere. In the future, all the training should be increased accordingly. Train them until they can't get up anymore. After everyone heard that, they felt their scalps go numb. Was the current training not heavy enough? The recruits who were knocked down secretly panicked. They thought of finding a chance to escape in the future. Jiang Pengji continued, if there are any deserters without a reason, they will be dealt with as deserters according to the camp rules. The internal rules of the military camp she had established were very strict. Jiang Pengji understood the importance of obedience to orders and prohibitions for the soldiers. She was even more clear that nothing could be accomplished without rules. Even if the soldiers were illiterate, they were required to memorize a few camp rules. During the assessment, they had to memorize them fluently. There were not many camp rules. One of them was dealing with deserters. Kill without mercy. Jiang Pengji smiled coldly and said, don't think that you'll be fine just because you escaped. You can escape, but you can't escape the temple. These new soldiers were all recruited from Xiangyang district. Their roots were here, so they really couldn't escape to anywhere else. She was about to look for the wooden spear when she saw a tall and strong man with a dark face return the wooden spear. Jiang Pengji asked, what's your name? Dian Yan answered, Dian Yan. It was good enough for a child from a poor family to have a decent name. Something as elegant as a courtesy name was basically non-existent. Jiang Pengji kept the wooden spear and said to him, Dian Yan? I'll remember this name. She asked a few sergeants to clean up the new recruit camp. She kept a sullen face as usual. It was not enough to just beat up the new recruit camp. She had to officially announce the news to clear up the rumors and misunderstandings about the female camp. Thinking about it, she missed Jiang Nongqin more. If she was the commander of the female camp, there would not be so much trouble. Jiang Pengji went to change out of the clothes of the female camp and changed back into men's attire. Then, she opened the streaming room. Chizai Yu Duo, streamer, from today onwards, you're my goddess. You look so handsome even when you're dirty. Chapter 475. My lord. Li Yun caught up with her from behind, his face filled with apprehension. Jiang Pengji said, that Dian Yan is not bad. When this phase of training in the new recruit camp is over, transfer him to my side. Transfer him to the Lord's side? Is she intending to nurture Dian Yan? Li Yun was astonished, but he said, yes, my lord. Why are you following me? Jiang Pengji took 2 steps, but Li Yun was still following her. She turned her head and asked him, are there no more training in the new recruit camp? Li Yun looked embarrassed and asked Jiang Pengji cautiously, my lord, the new recruits are injured to this extent. Are we still going to continue training today? One by one, they lay on the ground, crying out in pain. They looked very pathetic. Li Yun was a kind child, so he wondered if he should give the new recruits half a day to recuperate. After all, the training in winter was very heavy. Without a healthy body and sufficient rest, they would not be able to persevere to the end. Jiang Pengji snorted coldly and said, your lord knows when to stop. Otherwise, there would be hundreds of corpses lying on the ground. How could I let them whimper and wail? The injuries on their bodies only look scary. In reality, other than some pain, there are no other problems. They won't die. What a joke. If Jiang Pengji really went all out, the small bodies of these newbies would not be enough for her to tear them apart. Hearing this, Li Yun felt more at ease. What happened in the new recruit camp was quickly spread to the government office. Xueqi and Qiguan Rang revealed a curious expression. Xueqi even pinched his chin and touched the short beard that he had just grown. He smiled and chatted with others, saying, I wonder what my lord looks like when she dresses as a girl? Meng Hun happened to come to the government office to retrieve the bamboo scroll. Hearing Xueqi's words, his mind involuntarily pictured Jiang Pengji dressed as a girl, drawing her eyebrows and lips. She pitifully blinked her big watery eyes, spoke softly, and walked in small quick steps. Oh my God, Meng Hun almost shivered in fear. Qiguan Rang snorted and took out a small plate of fried and salted peanuts from the table. His words were harsh. With lord's looks, even if she's dressed like a fairy, men would probably be scared out of their wits when they see her face. They wouldn't have any romantic thoughts. Why do you have to take things so hard? The eyes were innocent. What had they done wrong? Why did they have to hurt them? Xueqi leaned over and stretched out his hand. He touched a handful of Qiguanrang's peanuts and put them in his mouth. They tasted good. That's true. My lord's face. I really can't think of anything. Xueqi and Qiguanrang joined hands to ridicule Jiang Pengji. They did not realize that Feng Jin and Wei Si had remained silent. Of course, even if they realized this, they probably would not care, because Feng Jin and Wei Si indeed did not look like people who would ridicule their masters. They were both gentlemen. A gentleman does not speak ill of others behind their backs. There is nothing wrong with that. Silently, Feng Jin and Wei Si looked at each other, then quickly moved away. They were all suspicious of each other's reactions. Could it be that Zixiao, Huayu knew something? What's with your expressions? It was rare for Jiang Pengji to come back to the government office. She realized that Xueqi and Qiguanrang's expressions were a little strange. I heard that my lord wiped out the recruit camp? Qiguanrang asked with a smile. Jiang Pengji rolled her eyes. She knew why these people were secretly laughing. She admitted it openly. Yes, your lord even changed into the uniform of the female camp and picked out all those little bastards. Qiguanrang held back his laughter and bowed with his hands folded in front of him. My lord is heroic. Jiang Pengji snorted. Qiguanrang's acting skills could fool others, but it definitely could not fool her eyes. She glanced at Qiguanrang and Xueqi and sat at the head of the table. Don't you want to see your lord dress up as a woman? Qiguanrang raised his eyebrows. He had a bad premonition in his heart, but he said honestly, Of course I do. Jiang Pengji supported her cheek with one hand and tapped on the table with the other. She was rather bored. She said, It's almost the new year. Anyway, you don't have to go back to reunite with your families. Why don't you just gather in the government office and celebrate the new year together? Instead of enjoying the festivities of the new year, why not play a game? Everyone will dress up. The men will dress up as women, and the women will dress up as men. How about that? Qiguanrang was silent for a moment. His lord was really bored to death. Nanshan Daiwanling, ha ha ha, I'm impressed by the streamer. How can you be so quick-witted? Zizai Xiaoyao, the streamer who dresses up as a man, suggested that everyone dress up. Streamer, you won't lose out on this deal. Chanel, dress up. I'm looking forward to Beauty CI dressing up as a woman. He'll definitely look like a fairy. Even though he knew that Jiang Pengji was only joking, Qiguanrang still had to explain lest she really did it. Pinching his carefully grown beard, Qiguanrang laughed at himself. My lord's suggestion is interesting. However, in order not to frighten the gods and Buddhas and disperse the luck of the coming year, this plan should be put on hold for the time being. Look at this face. Even if I put on makeup and change into a woman's uniform, I still don't look like a woman. Jiang Pengji curled her lips and shook her head with a smile. She turned to ask Feng Jin. On New Year's Eve, Huayu plans to accompany Jingxian to keep vigil at home? Chongqing is almost 8 months old now. Jingxian has been staying at home to take care of Chongqing. It looks quite boring. Why don't you bring her to the government office? The more people there are, the livelier it will be. Feng Jin thought about it. I'm tempted by my lord's suggestion, but I still have to go back and ask Jingxian for her opinion. Although Qiguanrang and Xueqi were married, their wives were not by their side. Needless to say, the others were all single. If they went back to celebrate the new year, it would indeed be a little lonely. Jiang Pengji suggested holding a New Year's banquet. Everyone would gather together to celebrate the new year. Naturally, no one had any objections, as long as she didn't go crazy and suggest cross-dressing. The government office went on a break 2 days in advance. The entire Xiangyang district had a more lively atmosphere for the new year. If one went to the night market, one could see the sincere and relaxed smiles on the faces of the people. The eateries, tea houses, and other shops closed one after another. This made Zhang Ping extremely worried. Zixiao is back. Zhang Ping was hungry. The eateries outside were all closed. He went to the streets to look for food for a long time, but he couldn't find it. Hearing movement outside the house, he poked his head out to take a look. Wei Si, who was wrapped tightly, walked slowly to the courtyard. The government office will go on a break today. Wei Si took off the wooden clogs on his feet and entered the main hall. He realized that the charcoal basin in the hall had been extinguished for a long time. He remembered that there was sufficient coal in the manor. It didn't make sense for it to burn out so quickly. Zhang Ping must have forgotten the time when he was tormenting the wood. He didn't even notice that the charcoal basin had been extinguished. "Yes, I brought this for you." Wei Ci took out a tightly wrapped warm item from his sleeve. It was wrapped in a braised chicken drumstick that was taken from the district headquarters kitchen. Chapter 476. Waves of tempting meaty fragrance seeped through the outer layer of leaves and spread out, lingering at the tip of one's nose, making one salivate. "The eateries are starting to close today. I knew you wouldn't be able to find a place to eat today." Wei Ci lit a few charcoal braziers and waited until the temperature in the room rose slightly before he took off the thick fur cloak covering his body. "I wonder when the restaurant will open?" Zhang Ping asked as he ate, completely disregarding the rule of not speaking while eating. "It should be the 5th day of the new year." Wei Ci did not know the exact date. This was just his guess. The government office closed 2 days in advance, for a total of 7 days. Calculating the time, the restaurants outside might open on the 5th day of the new year. During this period of time, Zhang Ping had nowhere to buy food. "Tomorrow, I will go to the broker house to buy an old maid who can cook and do laundry." Zhang Ping had said that he was going to buy it last time, but he still hadn't gone. There was some hesitation in Wei Ci's expression. Even Zhang Ping, who was a little slow on the uptake, could sense his abnormality. "Zixiao, if there's anything you want to say to me, just say it. There's no need to beat around the bush." Wei Ci sighed. Has Shiheng ever thought of staying in Xiangyang district? Zhang Ping frowned. He was not stupid and naturally understood that Wei Ci was trying to recruit him on behalf of his lord. "Zixiao, you know Ping's personality very well. He can't stand those government affairs. If I were to stay in the government office all day like you and deal with a bunch of vulgar people, I wouldn't be able to stand it." Zhang Ping's words were already a rejection. Some people, such as Wei Ci, wanted to pacify the 9 prefectures and the 4 seas and restore peace and tranquility to the world. Some people, on the other hand, would muddle along. No matter how chaotic the outside world was, they only liked to indulge in their own world, such as Zhang Ping. Everyone had their own aspirations, and they could not be forced. Wei Ci revealed a faint smile. "Our current lord's personality might be just what Shiheng wants." Zhang Ping raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "Shiheng used to study all kinds of siege and defensive equipment. Coincidentally, the lord is also a kindred spirit." Wei Ci's voice was neither fast nor slow. He was not the least bit worried that Zhang Ping would not be tempted. For someone like Zhang Ping, there was no other lord who could be more compatible with him than Jiang Pengji. Wei Ci understood her. She was not best at fighting a war or shooting her mouth off. Instead, she was best at using people. Taking Zhang Ping as an example, he was not very good at government affairs, but he was obsessed with mechanisms and objects. He was quite talented in designing and manufacturing. Therefore, it was impossible for Jiang Pengji to let Zhang Ping have too much contact with government affairs. The biggest possibility was to throw him into the woodworking workshop and set up a similar department to specialize in this area. Then she would squeeze him dry. However, not only would the passionate Zhang Ping not complain, he would even be happy to be squeezed dry. It was a typical case of being sold and still paying for the other party. Zhang Ping would not be convinced so easily. After all, no one knew how much exaggeration was mixed in his words. "Let me show you something. It won't be too late for Shiheng to make a decision after you see it." After saying that, Wei Ci took out a roll of bamboo paper from his sleeve. This roll of bamboo paper was not cut. It was very large, and after slowly unfolding, it was filled with strange charcoal drawings. Outsiders would not be able to understand it, but as a Mahist scholar, Zhang Ping was extremely sensitive to it. He almost pounced forward to snatch it. Zhang Ping carefully looked at the design of the crossbow bed. After looking at it for a while, his eyes became brighter and brighter. He suppressed the excitement in his voice and asked, "Who drew this?" "My lord drew it herself." She was curious about the Mahist family. However, due to her family heritage, she still studied Confucianism. Zhang Ping was fascinated by it. After a while, he sighed regretfully. "What a pity. It was a pity that a good seedling of the Mahist family entered Confucianism in vain. What was even more pitiful was that with Jiang Pengji's current status, it was impossible for her to study in peace. It was a waste of such good talent and spiritual energy. The corners of Wei Xi's lips curled up a few degrees. He asked him gently, "Did Shiheng agree?" Zhang Ping wanted to roll his eyes and said indignantly, "This trip is really a big loss." If he had known that there was such a trap waiting for him, Zhang Ping would not have followed Wei Xi north no matter what. Wei Xi's expression was pure and kind, but his tone was awkward. "There are many more complicated blueprints of machinery in the Lord's study. The one in your hand was only brought out after I spoke to the Lord in a friendly manner. If Shiheng is curious about the other blueprints, I can't help you even if I want to." In fact, Wei Xi only asked Jiang Pengji if she had anything that could lure the Mahist family, and she threw it at him. Zhang Ping was angry and said angrily, "Wei Xiao, you're also a black-hearted person." In order to attract people to join them, he even used such a shameless method. Did he not know that he was the most vulnerable to temptation? The smile on Wei Xi's face did not change. In fact, it was even more radiant. "My lord is going to hold a New Year's banquet. Do you want to go together?" Zhang Ping was still a little depressed at this moment. He opened his mouth and said, "No." Wei Xi said, "There's no rice stored at home." "Are you planning to drink the northwest wind until the restaurant opens on the 5th day of the new year?" Zhang Ping was speechless. This time, he was really speechless. Speaking of this, he suddenly thought of something. How did Wei Xi solve his personal food problem during this period of time? Zhang Ping's mouth opened wide and he asked this question. Wei Xi answered, "There's a special small kitchen in the government office. The food on weekdays is not bad." Especially after Wei Xi came, everyone's standard of living rose rapidly. Even Qiguan Rang and the others complained that they had benefited from Wei Xi. Because Wei Xi was a patient, he needed to take good care of his body. Naturally, his food had to be exquisite and nutritionally balanced. Jiang Pengji learned from the audience in the streaming room and applied what she had learned. She went to make a pot and other cutlery. She taught the chef how to use oil to stir-fry and how to add seasonings to make the food more delicious. Only then did the audience in the streaming room know that the food in the streamer's world was so backward. The food in this era was simply cooked. How could this be tolerated? The seasonings were at most salt and pepper. There wasn't even a pot for stir-frying, let alone stir-frying. Many foods were directly boiled in hot water. For example, boiling cabbage in hot water and adding a little salt. Such bland and tasteless food. Oh, it was winter now. There was no cabbage at all. Not to mention steaming, stir-frying, deep-frying, roasting, sautéing, braising, stewing, deep-frying, simmering, mixing. As for the 8 major cuisines described by the audience in the streaming room, it was even more impossible to count on them. Even if Jiang Pengji did not focus on the enjoyment of the tongue, after a long time, she became a little gluttonous from the teasing of the audience in the streaming room. Therefore, it was understandable that Wei Xi had put on a little weight during this period of time. For example, the braised chicken drumstick that Wei Xi had secretly brought back that day was the result of Jiang Pengji's experiments with the chef several times. They wasted a lot of ingredients and seasonings to make it. Such a braised chicken already made Feng Jin not want to go home. Even so, the audience in the streaming room was still picky. They felt that she ate too hard. Kneeling down to call her father, "Sigh, poor streamer. I really want to order a cross-dimensional takeaway so that you can broaden your horizons." Sishijing, "Hey, yellow chicken manor? Why isn't the braised chicken and rice I ordered here yet?" Chapter 477. In the blink of an eye, 2 days had passed. The people of Xiangyang district had returned home to reunite with their families. The recruits of the recruit camp had their morning training as usual and were dismissed after noon. They had half a day off to celebrate the festival with their families. Luo Yue, Meng Hun, Li Yun, and the rest gathered in the main hall of the district headquarters, preparing to celebrate the festival with Jiang Pengji. Wah. The 8-month-old Chongqing was already quite sturdy. She smiled at everyone she saw, revealing her bright red gums and white teeth. Since the first time she pestered Feng Jin and was brought to the government office by him, Chongqing came over a few times. The weather was cold. She wore 2 sweaters that Wei Jingxian knitted and 2 dresses with fur lining. Finally, she put on a thick hooded cloak. From afar, she looked like a chubby ball. Chongqing was very restless. She wanted to pounce on someone she knew. If Feng Jin did not hold her firmly, the girl would definitely cause a ruckus. Happy New Year! Jiang Pengji heard Chongqing's voice and came out to welcome her. Feng Jin could not help but smile bitterly. As a father, his position in his daughter's heart was not as high as his lord. He was not as likable as his lord. As a minister, he was not as important as his daughter in the lord's heart. Anyway, he would not be narcissistic and think that Jiang Pengji came out to welcome him. Jiang Pengji took Chongqing, who was writhing restlessly, and weighed her. Chongqing has become stronger. Once in her arms, Chongqing immediately quieted down. She blinked her eyes obediently and looked innocent. She is used to pretending to be obedient in front of others. Feng Jin held Wei Jingxian's hand with his other hand and said, "It's windy outside. Let's go inside." It was freezing outside and the wind and snow were blowing. Charcoal pots were burning in the 4 corners of the hall. Warm air blew into their faces. Taking off the cloak to ward off the cold, Feng Jin found a seat and sat down. Wei Jingxian sat next to him. Not long after, everyone arrived one after another. Jiang Pengji let Chongqing sit next to her and clapped her hands to signal the servants to serve the meal for the night. It was winter and the ingredients were limited. However, it was the first New Year's banquet after all. Jiang Pengji did not want to make it too shabby. After earnestly asking the audience in the streaming room for advice, Jiang Pengji sorted out the available game ingredients and tried to make the New Year's banquet as rich as possible. If it was in the past, the meat would be boiled in the hot soup after removing the stench, then it would be sliced and served on a plate. Now, TSK, she guaranteed that after tonight's banquet, everyone would gain 2 to 3 kilograms. Because it was a separate meal, the portion of each dish was not much, only enough for one person to eat 4 or 5 mouthfuls. Zhang Ping was tricked by Wei Ci to come over. He looked left and right but did not see any singing or dancing. He immediately felt a little dispirited. Now that he heard her say to serve the dishes directly, images of various kinds of cooked meat appeared in his mind, and his mouth felt greasy. However, when the plates of delicious food were served on the table, it made his mouth water. He immediately complained. Why are the plates so small? Why are there so few dishes on the plates? He glanced sideways and realized that the dishes on Wei Ci's side were basically untouched. He felt even more aggrieved. He had not eaten enough. Wei Ci's taste was light, but Zhang Ping's was the complete opposite of his. Noticing his friend's resentful gaze, Wei Ci pursed his lips and secretly moved the dishes that he had not touched to the table. Don't eat too much. There's more to come. He lowered his voice and smiled gently. Zhang Ping secretly glanced at the young man on the main seat and muttered, "Is there no singing and dancing to liven things up?" Wei Ci blinked and asked, "Are you going to dance?" The district headquarters does not keep singers and dancers. You can't watch it even if you want to. Zhang Ping was speechless. Why did he feel that Wei Ci was getting more and more annoying? Don't watch it then. It's boring anyway, he said. The lord you chose is a gentle person. At that moment, Jiang Pengji was helplessly soaking a piece of mapo tofu in hot water to dilute the spiciness. She then crushed it on a soup spoon and brought it to the noisy Chongqing's mouth. The little girl opened her mouth and slurped with satisfaction. She smacked her lips and looked at Jiang Pengji with a burning gaze. She still wanted to eat. An 8-month-old child was naturally noisy, but the lord treated her patiently and coaxed her meticulously. She had been taking care of the child and had not even touched her chopsticks. Wei Ci was stunned for a moment. He looked up at Jiang Pengji on the main seat and looked a little absent-minded. She has always been very patient with children. When Chongqing was half full, Jiang Pengji began to eat. On the other side, Wei Jingxian was also amazed. Her daughter had to be coaxed every day before she was willing to eat. Feng Jin also felt that this was too spoiling of the child. He tried to use a tough attitude, but it had little effect. It was rare for Chongqing to sit obediently and wait to be fed. He always felt that he had given birth to a fake daughter. Feng Jin knew his daughter and said with a smile, "She's not obedient. She's obviously afraid." In front of Qiguan Rang and the others, she acted coquettishly and cute. In front of Meng Hun and the others, she was obedient and docile.
At first, he did not understand. Later, Jiang Pengji revealed the secret. A child's intuition was sharper than that of an adult. Luo Yue and the others had the smell of blood on them. They were so afraid that they did not dare to fool around. Jiang Pengji was somewhat full. She asked the crowd, "Is anyone willing to add to the fun?" There were no singers and dancers, but they could watch their subordinates show off their talents. Everyone's faces stiffened and they secretly smiled bitterly. So they were waiting there. Chongqing giggled as if she was making a fuss. In terms of talents, except for Chongqing, everyone present was multi-talented. Even a martial artist like Meng Hun could perform a sword dance to show off his martial arts. It could barely be considered a performance. Feng Jin and the others were even more proficient in the four arts. They would never have stage fright. Xiangyang district was joyous and harmonious. The people seemed to have walked out of the dark clouds of the earthquake. They celebrated the new year and looked forward to the future. Far away in Hejian County, the troops celebrated the new year in the same way. It was a habit in the past, but this year it was somewhat tense. The source of everything was the prominent Zhang family in Hejian. Jiang Nongqin was originally arranging various matters for the New Year's banquet when she heard that the servants of the Lus had come to invite them. She raised her eyebrows and was secretly annoyed. The second lady sat on the main seat and said sarcastically, "Your manners young lady is missing. Instead of looking for her in the manor, you come to the second branch of the Lus to make trouble. Are you sure that my husband is not at home and you think that a group of women are easy to bully? It's the New Year's banquet today. Don't make it difficult for anyone." Madam Hu also came out to watch the show. She looked coldly at Zhang Zhaosher opposite her. Zhang Zhaosher was the legal wife of the Zhang family. She was dressed luxuriously and her makeup was elegant and graceful. She did not care about the second lady's words at all. There was a mean look in the corners of her eyes. She obviously came to ask for help, but she put on the posture of a protagonist. "I've looked for her again and again. That little B*TCH is hiding in the Lu residence. If you don't hand her over today, this matter will not end. TSK, then you won't end it. However, the Lu residence is small. I'm afraid there's no place for Madame Zhang to stay." The second lady leaned on the table and did not take Zhang Zhaosher seriously at all. Madame Hu covered her mouth with her sleeve to hide the gloating smile on her face. At this moment, Jiang Nongqin came over and bowed respectfully to greet her. The second lady asked, "Madame Zhang said that their young lady is hiding in our residence. Is that true?" Jiang Nongqin said expressionlessly, "No." Chapter 478. The second lady admired her armor. Her eyes filled with disdain. "Mrs. Zhang, you've heard it. The Lu residence doesn't have the person you want. If you continue to be unreasonable and bully the second branch of the Lu residence, there will be no end to this. The Zhang family is considered a distinguished family. As for you, who do you think you are?" The second lady's words angered Mrs. Zhang so much that her face turned green. She glared at the second lady as if her eyes could spit venom. She took a deep breath and secretly clenched her fists. Her long fingernails dug into the flesh of her palms, and there was a sinister smile on her face. "Mrs. Meng, what do you mean? The person ran to your residence. You were the ones who abducted the young madam of the Zhang residence. Even if Lu Zhongqing was here, he would have to give us an explanation, much less your master." Mrs. Zhang mocked Gu Zhan in a strange tone. She purposely emphasized the word, Mrs. Meng. Everyone in Hejian County knew about the second lady, Gu Zhan's background. Her original husband was Meng Zhan from Cangzhou. She was discontented and divorced her husband, Meng Zhan. She then turned around and married her brother-in-law. They had never seen such a shameless woman. A good woman should not marry a second husband. Why didn't the Lu clan capture a woman like Gu Zhan and drown her in the pond? The second lady, Gu Zhan, heard the way Mrs. Zhang addressed her. Her gloomy face darkened. Mrs. Zhang thought she had the upper hand and could not help but feel proud. After a woman marries, she should treat her husband as her god and be faithful to him. This is the model of women and the first virtue of women. I heard that when Mrs. Meng was still in Cangzhou, she was discontented. Meng Zhan did not divorce you because he cared about the reputation of the two families. Instead, they separated. It's not that I want to talk too much,
But Mrs. Meng should really read the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women and know what shame is. As soon as she said this, the entire room was silent. Mrs. Hu secretly glanced at the second lady. Her face was already extremely dark. The second lady took a sip of tea and suppressed the rising anger in her heart. Madame Zhang continued, "That daughter-in-law of mine is disobedient and absconds without permission. Such a wicked woman has tarnished the Zhang family's hundreds of years of reputation. We will naturally capture her back and interrogate her. As for you, Lady Meng, let me give you a piece of advice. You're still a slut yourself. Don't worry about other people's business." Ah! The second lady leaned against the table and threw the teacup in her hand at Mrs. Zhang's face. Seeing the tea and tea stains on Mrs. Zhang's face, the second lady laughed heartily. There was no sound in the room except for Mrs. Zhang's screams and the second lady's laughter that was as sweet as an oriole. I, Gu Zhen, was born into a truly prestigious family. When it comes to knowledge, it's not up to you, a girl from a poor family who has fallen from grace, to comment. The second madam took off her clothes and said arrogantly, "Zhang Zhaosher, you are an orphan daughter. Marrying Zhang Zhaosher's only son is indeed a great achievement for you. She has a low status, so she feels inferior and lowly. She regards her husband as heaven and earth. I can understand that. After all, the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women is regarded as a standard by a woman who feels inferior and lowly. Do you think that I'm right?" Mrs. Zhang's eyes turned fierce. Jiang Nongqin, who had sensed the killing intent, reacted immediately. She went forward and captured Mrs. Zhang. The people from the Zhang residence saw that something was wrong and wanted to save her. They did not expect to be subdued by the Lu residence's servants. "You came to our Lu residence to make trouble. Why didn't Mrs. Zhang investigate the situation of our Lu residence? Also, you have to remember one thing." The second lady was arrogant and domineering. She walked up to Mrs. Zhang and pinched her chin with her armored fingers. "Call me Mrs. Lu. If you call me wrong, someone will die." Mrs. Zhang was shocked. She immediately understood why the people she sent to the Lu residence to ask for Shangguan Wan had failed. Hearing that the second lady wanted to kill someone, she was shocked. Her heart thumped and her face turned pale. "How dare you!" She did not want to come and take Shangguan Wan herself, but Shangguan Wan left a divorce letter and ran away. It was a slap to Zhang Zhaosher's face. Zhang Zhaosher could not bear it and came to take Shangguan Wan on New Year's Day. She also wanted to teach the Lu residents a lesson. However, she forgot that no matter what kind of person she was, they were all *T in the face of absolute power. Ever since the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women became popular in Hejin County, Gu Zhen was ostracized by a group of noble ladies. They avoided her in all activities. However, these noble ladies also forgot that Gu Zhen always liked to stay at home and did not bother to communicate with them. However, Gu Zhen did not show up for a long time, which gave everyone an illusion. Lu Shi's wife, Gu Zhen, was a remarried woman and a dirty woman who had gone through 2 husbands. She was not qualified to be on equal footing with them. The second lady asked in surprise, "Why wouldn't I dare? I wonder who gave Mrs. Zhang the illusion that I don't dare to?" After saying that, she suddenly pinched Mrs. Zhang's chin and forced her to come closer to her. The words that made Mrs. Zhang's body turn cold came out of the second lady's red and plump lips. "You're just from a small family and your horizons are limited. You've read the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women, and your already stupid brain has become even more stupid. If you don't believe me, you can go back and ask your husband. Ask him, if I brought people to smash the Zhang residence's door, would he dare to fight back? If he dares to fight back, I, Gu Zhen, will write my name backwards." Letting go of Mrs. Zhang's chin, Gu Zhen took out a handkerchief and carefully wiped her hands, as if she had touched something dirty. She pretended to say unintentionally, "You're indeed from a poor family. You're so petty." Mrs. Zhang was so angry that her face turned green. However, Nongqin's hand was like an eagle's claw that held her tightly. She could not break free. Mrs. Zhang is so proficient in the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women. Can you tell me, if a woman's body is seen by a strange man, should she die as an apology? The second lady returned to her seat of honor and leaned lazily against the table. "I remember that before Mrs. Zhang got married, you made a living by sewing and often went out to deal with the merchants of the embroidery workshop. One year, You fell into the water and was rescued by a few passing villagers. Qu'est-ce? I wonder how many green hats Mrs. Zhang has made your husband wear? The second lady covered her mouth with her sleeve, her eyes filled with evil intentions. This matter can't be hidden. Tomorrow, I'll go to Mrs. Zhang's house and ask if a shameless woman like you should be drowned in the pond to preserve Mrs. Zhang's reputation. After all, starvation is a small matter, but losing your chastity is a big deal. Mrs. Zhang should die to prove her innocence. Mrs. Zhang's face had already turned pale. She was afraid that the second lady would take her life. Although she did not think that Gu Zhan would dare to do so, her own life was more important. She could not take the risk. Send the guest out. The second lady's expression suddenly darkened. She waved her sleeve to send the guest out. Nongqin sent the distinguished Mrs. Zhang out as if she was catching a chick. Madam Hu smiled and said, "Madam, you're really not afraid of trouble." Chapter 479. A good new year has been spoiled by this kind of person. What a disappointment. Madam Hu stood up with some displeasure on her face. The second lady took a sip of tea with a strange look in her eyes. She called Jiang Nongqin over. "When will you depart?" Jiang Nongqin bowed her head and said respectfully, "In another 5 days, when everything in Hejin is settled, I'll depart for Xiangyang district." The second lady said, "Leave with Wanner as soon as possible. If you delay, I'm afraid there will be changes." Jiang Nongqin's expression changed and she said hesitantly, "But madam, if that shrew comes again," the second lady said scornfully, "so what if she comes? If she comes again, I'll break her legs." Although Madame Zhang was here to make trouble, she was right because the missing Shangguan Wan was indeed hiding in the Lu residence. Shangguan Wan came to the Lu residence. Rather than saying that she left the divorce letter and ran away, it was more accurate to say that the second madam pitied her and gave her an idea and shelter. Otherwise, the grass on Shangguan Wan's grave would have been as tall as a person. The second lady had seen the smart and lively Shangguan Wan before. In her memory, this girl had always been a spoiled noble lady from a noble family. However, when they met again, she did not expect that such a lively and beautiful girl would be tortured to such a haggard and lifeless state. This matter had to start from 3 years ago. Shangguan Wan's mother passed away due to illness and her father then remarried. The second wife was a noble lady from Zhongzhou and was not from a noble family. She was just a second wife and did not have a high status requirement. The second wife was a daughter of a concubine and did not bring a rich dowry. The only highlight was probably a few sets of the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women. She claimed to be familiar with the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women and acted according to the contents of the books. It was funny that her humble appearance made her sisters-in-law and mother-in-law feel comfortable. The old lady was flattered and casually asked the second wife to teach Shangguan Wan well and not neglect her. This second wife used a chicken feather as a token of authority, and used the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women to teach Shangguan Wan. How could Shangguan Wan agree? As a noble lady from a noble family, she scoffed at the contents of the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women. The mother and daughter who had married halfway were quite unhappy. At first, the Shangguan family was biased towards Shangguan Wan. As time went by, the second wife became pregnant, so Shangguan Wan's advantage was instantly reduced, and she was suppressed by the stepmother. The real trigger that led to Shangguan Wan's tragedy was her first engagement. Originally, the man had said that he was willing to wait until she was out of mourning, but the stepmother had somehow heard that Shangguan Wan had once fallen into a bandit's lair, and she even said that Shangguan Wan was a girl who had lost her virginity. Of course, this was not said in public, but it was indeed spread. His mother had read the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women and deeply felt that the contents of the books were very reasonable. She increasingly felt that marrying a girl like Shangguan Wan, who had lost her virginity, was a disgrace to the family, so she forcefully broke off the engagement. Shangguan Wan's engagement was broken off because of her reputation as a girl who had lost her virginity. Shangguan Wan became the joke of the entire Hejin county, and the Shangguan family was also deeply ashamed. The second wife was motherly and benevolent. She volunteered to teach Shangguan Wan and arranged another marriage for her. As the legitimate son of the Zhang family in Hejin, his status was not as high as that of the Shangguan family, but it was not too bad. However, Shangguan Wan later found out that her stepmother had sinister intentions. The stepmother and Zhang Zhaoshi, who was also Mrs. Zhang who had just come to make a scene, were on good terms. The legitimate son of the Zhang family turned out to be a naturally eunuch, and he was also weak and sickly. He was on his last breath and could not have sex at all. The stepmother arranged such a marriage for Shangguan in the name of her own good, and directly pushed Shangguan into the fire pit. However, this matter was not over yet. The sick legitimate son of the Zhang family was dying before the marriage. The stepmother persuaded Shangguan to marry and become a widow with the excuse that the marriage has been decided, and Wanner is the wife of the Zhang family.
How can she marry someone else?
Her words were full of sarcasm, and she repeatedly reminded Shangguan that she was a girl who had lost her virginity.
Zhang Zhaoshi refused to accept it.
She said that Shangguan had killed her son and insisted that Shangguan marry over to keep her son's chastity. Shangguan was isolated and helpless. Almost all of her family stood on the side of her stepmother. She could only be forced to marry into the Zhang family miserably. After the invalid died, she had to wear a wedding dress and marry a rooster. On the second day of marriage, she had to endure the sarcasm of her mother-in-law. As the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women became popular in Hejian, Shangguan's life became more and more difficult. Not only her, but those noble ladies who had been involved in bandits were more or less affected. The stepmother was on good terms with Zhang Zhaoshi, and she inadvertently mentioned that if a woman could not bear loneliness, she might commit adultery to vent her lust. This was also an act of destroying one's reputation and chastity. In Zhongzhou, unyielding widows would cut off their fingers to show their determination to keep their chastity. Zhang Zhaoshi was worried that Shangguan was young and might make her son a cuckold. She hoped that Shangguan could also cut off her fingers so that she could not bear loneliness and commit adultery. How could Shangguan agree? But she was alone in the Zhang family, and no one in the Shangguan family thought that she was innocent. If she did not think of a way, she really could not live. Zhang Zhaoshi pressed her step by step, and Shangguan clenched her teeth and refused to agree. How much pressure was she under? Finally, taking advantage of the opportunity to go up the mountain to worship Buddha, she simply chose to commit suicide. In the end, she did not succeed, because she was stopped by the stepmother. After listening to Shangguan's experience, the stepmother could not help but think of herself, who was once alone and helpless. Her heart softened, and she agreed to save her. After a few days, Zhang Zhaoshi's patience ran out, and she was ready to ask someone to cut off Shangguan's fingers. She left a divorce letter and successfully escaped from the Zhang family with the help of the Lu troop. To be safe, she did not live in the Lu family, but in the troop camp instead. She hid there for more than half a year. Half a month ago, her traces were accidentally leaked, and Zhang Zhaoshi repeatedly sent people to ask for her. These people were all sent away, and in the end, Zhang Zhaoshi had no choice but to personally bring people over. Because of this, Jiang Nongqin was not in the mood to eat the New Year's banquet, and her face had been gloomy. Shangguan had long changed out of her noble lady attire into coarse civilian clothes. She was now adapting well in the troop. Sister Nongqin, those people from the Lu family have left, right? A trace of fear flashed across her face, and she looked unusually nervous and fearful. She had completely lost her previous bravery and flamboyance. We have to leave for the north in advance, Jiang Nongqin said. Lady Wan, let's go together. If we stay here, sooner or later, we won't be able to hide. She could hide the first time, but she could not hide forever. Shangguan had left a divorce letter, but Zhang Zhaoshi had already determined that even if Shangguan died, she would still be their soul. If she was caught and brought back, she would probably be tortured severely. In less than 10 days to half a month, the news of her sudden death would spread. In the past 2 years, Jiang Nongqin had saved many women who had been forced into a corner. They were all victims of the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women. Now that the world was already so difficult, why did they still impose so many cruel shackles on innocent women? In this era where the clan's law was above the law, if the clan wanted to catch an unchaste woman and drown her in a pond, it would really be a dead end.
Chapter 480. Everyone wanted to live, and Shangguan was no exception.
But after experiencing those dark months, she would rather die than go back. Are we going north to look for Brother Lanting? Ever since she agreed to go north with them, Shangguan felt as if a heavy burden had been removed from her shoulders.
She felt light and at ease.
Yes. Jiang Nongqin nodded and added, The journey will be more dangerous. Lady Wan, you must be mentally prepared. Shangguan Wan had vaguely heard about the situation in the north. She knew that the Tsing-Yi army and the Red Lotus group were fighting, but could they be more terrifying than the Zhang residents? Her eyes darkened and she said with determination, "Don't worry, Sister Nongqin. I'm not afraid." It was better to do this sooner rather than later. The troops were ready to depart in 2 days, which was 3 days earlier than the original plan. Shangguan Wan had been hiding in the troop camp for more than half a year. In the beginning, she was a little timid. Her mental state and emotions were very unstable, and her body was very weak. Later, Jiang Nongqin took her to learn martial arts to strengthen her body. In addition, Shangguan Wan had a certain foundation, so she learned very quickly. Even if he couldn't kill or capture them, at least he had the ability to protect himself. Zhang Zhaoshi was wronged in the Lu mansion. When she went back, she cried and complained to her husband, adding fuel to the fire. She thought that her husband would help her for the sake of her dead son, but he slapped Zhang Zhaoshi in the face instead. Not only that, he even scolded her for being short-sighted and wanted to drag her to the Lu residence to apologize. Zhang Zhaoshi was dumbfounded. Anger rose in her heart, and she cried and scolded her husband. "Why should I apologize to an unchaste woman? That Gu Zhan is not a good person. She is fickle. Don't tell me that even you have been seduced by her? She's harboring that little bitch, Shangguan Wan. Do you want our son to die with everlasting regret?" Zhang Zhaoshi's husband was also confused. He didn't know when his wife had become so unreasonable. He smiled coldly and said word by word, "You ask me why? Just because she came from a prestigious family. Just because her husband was the magistrate of Chongzhou. In today's world, if someone wants you dead, you can't live. Do you understand? Look at it the other way round. What do you have? Let's not talk about whether she was harboring her daughter-in-law or not. The key is, do you have any evidence? Where are the witnesses and material evidence? You don't have anything at all, yet you dare to come here and ask for him. What a shrew!" Zhang Zhaoshi still wanted to refute, but her husband said again, "You should stop interacting with the second wife of the Shangguan family in the future. Look at how disgusting you are now. You're torturing your daughter-in-law at home, but I'm turning a blind eye. I only hope that you don't go too far. Although Madame Shangguan doesn't love her anymore, she still has the blood of Shangguan in her bones. What right do you have to torture her to death?" Zhang Zhaoshi opened her mouth and said awkwardly after a while, "I'm her mother-in-law." Her husband chuckled coldly. "She has already written the divorce papers and gone through the official channels. What kind of mother-in-law are you? You didn't give birth to her, nor did you raise her. What right do you have to decide her life and death? Just because of those books that you hold in your hands all day long? If you have the time, read the words of the real sages, and stop reading these crooked things." Zhang Zhaoshi's husband said this not because he thought that the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women was bad, but because his mother was also a remarried woman. If he acknowledged the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women, wouldn't he be scolding his old mother? Looking at Zhang Zhaoshi's absent-minded expression, he curled his lips and left. Zhang Zhaoshi suddenly broke down, with an expression that looked like she was about to cry. Her husband was determined to make her apologize to Gu Zhan. If she did not agree, her life in the residence would be difficult in the future. The legitimate son she gave birth to was sickly and naturally castrated, but the sons of her husband and other concubines were smart and healthy. Because of this, her husband felt that it was all Zhang Zhaoshi's fault that the legitimate son was handicapped. Ever since the legitimate son was born, he rarely entered her room. Her belly had never moved, but the sons and daughters of the concubines jumped out one after another. In the morning of the 2nd day of the new year, the troops were ready to leave. Before leaving, Lady Gu Zhan invited Shangguan Wan to watch a good show. Shangguan Wan looked at the plain and completely unfamiliar woman in the mirror in disbelief. She deeply felt the magic of Lady Gu Zhan's hands. "My sister taught her. It's a good skill," the second lady said in a flat tone. "I wonder what kind of show you want me to watch, madam?" Shangguan Wan asked. The second lady said, "You'll know in a while. Wait behind the screen and just watch the show." Not long after, the gatekeeper reported that Zhang Zhaoshi had come. Shangguan Wan subconsciously tensed up and clenched her fists tightly. "Lady Zhang, what a rare guest. Why are you here?" The second lady's voice passed through the screen and reached Shangguan Wan's ears. She said sarcastically, "I don't have the young madam of the Zhang residence here. Do you want to bring people to search me today?" After a while, Shangguan Wan heard the familiar voice of her former mother-in-law. Her usual sarcasm was replaced by flattery. She was humble and submissive. It was impossible to imagine how powerful and arrogant she was in the Zhang residence. Now, Shangguan Wan secretly bit her lower lip. She felt inexplicably carefree when she heard Zhang Zhaoshe flattering and apologizing to the second lady and calling her Madame Lu so intimately. The second lady's reaction was indifferent. She only responded impatiently after the other party said more than 10 sentences. Even though she was so neglectful, the other party still carefully flattered her. After hearing a lot of flattery, the second lady finally showed mercy and sent Zhang Zhaoshe away. The other party felt as if she had been pardoned. When the people of the Zhang residence had completely left, Shangguan Wan quietly walked out of the screen. The second lady said, "Did you hear what was said just now clearly?" Shangguan Wan nodded. "Yes." The second lady took a sip of tea. The bright red rouge on her lips was still gorgeous. She opened her mouth slightly. In terms of prestige and status, the Lu residence is not much higher than the Zhang residence in Hejian. But you saw how she was just now. Why do you think that old woman is so submissive and flatters me everywhere? Shangguan Wan thought for a while. Because of Uncle Lu? Not because of my brother-in-law, but because of the troops in my brother-in-law's hands. The second lady said with a smile, "Wanner, we hit it off at first sight. I feel very sorry for what you've been through, so I'm here to say a few words. If you hold military power one day, those people will also flatter you shamelessly. Only when you're strong can you not be bullied by others. All external forces are unreliable. Now, you can only rely on yourself." Shangguan Wan was the daughter of the Shangguan family's legal wife. No one dared to provoke her in the past. She had the highest status among the noble ladies in Hejian. Because she was doted on by the Shangguan family, everyone was afraid of the power behind her. But when Shangguan Wan lost the love of her family, she was violated and treated so harshly that she was almost forced to commit suicide. The second lady made it clear, and Shangguan Wan was a sensible person, so she understood what she meant. Chapter 481. Shangguan Wan was hesitant, and her face showed that she was struggling. The second lady said, "Wanner, although you despise those evil books, you still acknowledge them after all." Shangguan Wan's expression froze, and she quickly denied. How is that possible? How could she agree with those books that were full of fallacious theories? The second lady asked her, "If that's the case, why do you doubt that you can't do it?" Shangguan Wan was dumbfounded and speechless. After a while, her hesitant eyes became firm, and she bowed to the second lady. "Thank you for your advice, madam." The second lady continued, "The Shangguan family has your stepmother, so you can't get their protection. The Lu residents can't always protect you. If you want to get rid of Zhang completely, you can only rely on yourself in the future. Do your best and remember to take care of yourself." Shangguan Wan's eyes reddened, and she gritted her teeth and nodded. "Thank you, madam." She had also thought that if her mother hadn't suddenly died of illness, she wouldn't have ended up like this. At least, she wouldn't have been tortured like this. But on second thought, what was the point of resenting these things? There were no ifs in this world, and reality was reality. Instead of thinking about the past, it was better to think about one's future. The second lady watched Shangguan Wan leave and secretly shook her head. If it was the old Shangguan Wan, she wouldn't have needed to point these things out. However, after being tortured by her stepmother and the Zhang mansion, her pride had been broken in just a short 1 or 2 years. The 4 self-accomplishment classics for women that Shangguan Wan despised had also subtly poisoned her. Now, she hoped that this child could be reborn and have another exciting life. Thinking of this, the second lady smiled gently, like a delicate flower in the water. "You really like to meddle in other people's business." Madam Hu's lazy voice came from behind. The second lady said calmly, "I just see my own shadow in this little girl." She had her sister to protect her, but Shangguan Wan had nothing, so she couldn't help but soften. Rather than saying that she was helping Shangguan Wan, it was better to say that she was helping her own shadow. Zhang Zhaoshe left the Lu residence unwillingly and resentfully. She heard that a troop of the Lu residents was about to leave Hejian County. She tensed up, and a trace of malice flashed across her face. After a while she said fiercely, "Go after them." Her intuition told her that Shangguan Wan must be among these troops. That little bitch wanted to fish in troubled waters and escape from Hejian County. Seeing that they were about to leave the territory of Hejian County, Shangguan Wan was in high spirits, but the dense sound of hooves could be heard behind her.
"Don't be afraid." Jiang Nongqin's expression was still calm. She comforted Shangguan Wan in a low voice. "I'll deal with them."
The 100 or so people who were chasing after them were the servants of the Zhang residents.
Behind them was a speeding carriage. The curtain of the carriage was lifted. Zhang Zhaosher was sitting inside with a gloomy face.
"Hand over the little bitch, Shangguan Wan."
Zhang Zhaosher didn't care about the troops at all, because they were just servants and didn't even have the right to talk to her. Jiang Nongqin scoffed.
She raised her hand and said in a hoarse voice, "Get into formation and face the enemy." As soon as he finished speaking, the troops, who were originally carrying heavy loads and hurrying on their way, formed a defensive formation as fast as they could. Hundreds of longbows were drawn and arrows were aimed at the people of the Zhang residents. Seeing this, Zhang Zhaosher's face was so gloomy that ink seemed to drip out. Jiang Nongqin could be considered as half a disciple of Jiang Pengji. She would fight whenever there was a disagreement. If she could fight, she would never talk nonsense. Zhang Zhaosher, who was weak in combat, could at most rely on the servants around her to act like a tyrant. Jiang Nongqin was not afraid of fighting with her fists. She asked Zhang Zhaosher in a hoarse voice, "Mrs. Zhang, is the person you're looking for here?"
Cold sweat broke out on Zhang Zhaosher's forehead.
She secretly held the crossbar of the carriage door tightly. Even if she felt that a group of servants would not dare to hurt her, the suffocating murderous intent still scared her. Facing hundreds of arrows that were pointed straight at her head, she felt that if her answer was not satisfactory, she might turn into a hornet's nest in the next second.
She almost stopped breathing.
She was afraid that the servants in front of her would harm her.
In his heart, he was secretly angry. These servants of the Lu residents actually dared to be so arrogant.
"Mrs. Zhang, is the person you're looking for here?"
Jiang Nongqin asked again with a calm expression.
After a while, Zhang Zhaosher swallowed her anger and said with a twisted face, "No, I was wrong." When Jiang Nongqin heard this, a faint sarcasm appeared at the corner of her lips. She raised her hand and ordered the troops to put away their longbows.
Zhang Zhaosher looked at Nongqin's attire, and a trace of contempt flashed across her eyes. From her point of view, Nongqin was the most unladylike woman. She should be drowned in a pig cage and ridden on a wooden donkey.
"Let's go."
Jiang Nongqin ordered a troop to cover the rear in case Zhang Zhaosher attacked from behind.
The rest of the people retreated in an orderly manner.
Shangguan Wan waited at the rear with rapid breathing. Seeing this situation, she slowly breathed a sigh of relief.
A woman who bullies the weak and fears the strong is the easiest to get rid of.
Jiang Nongqin came back with a cold face and concluded.
Shangguan Wan burst out laughing, and her nervousness disappeared. "I suddenly realized that Sister Nongqin's way of doing things is very similar to Brother Lanting's.
How can I be compared to Lang Jun?"
Jiang Nongqin shook her head and turned over to get on the horse.
"Let's go."
Shangguan Wan had learned horsemanship and archery when she was still in her boudoir. Later on, when the kidnappers happened, the residents hired a martial arts teacher for her. She also knew martial arts, not to mention that she had stayed in the troops' camp for more than half a year. If she fought seriously, some of the male troops might not be her match. Of course, since Shangguan Wan had never seen blood on her hands, she would definitely be the one to die if they fought to the death. The journey to the north was rather difficult. The surrounding refugees not only coveted their clothes and food, but also the women in the camp. When they were approaching the border of Wanzhou, even Shangguan Wan had killed a few people. The situation is unstable. There is a war in the north. The Tsing-Yi army and the Red Lotus group are fighting fiercely. After more than half a month, the 2,000 troops had lost a lot of weight. Shangguan Wan, who had always been pampered, had also lost weight. Her skin had darkened, but she had become much more capable. Shangguan Wan had a saber hanging on her waist. She was dressed in clothes that could barely keep out the cold, and she wore a coarse cloak. Even so, most of the people who are implicated are innocent people.
Shangguan Wan's face was gloomy.
She really could not relax in such a hellish scene. Along the way, the increasingly harsh and cruel reality taught her a harsh lesson. In the outside world, there were no luxurious clothes and no tall buildings. Corpses that died of illness or froze to death by the roadside were one after another. Birds that could not find food in winter fed on the corpses, and they would peck a complete corpse until it was broken. If the battles in the inner chamber were like needles hidden in silk floss, and the tongue was the most powerful weapon, then the battles in the outside world were different. There were too many factors that could threaten the lives of the common people. The bitter cold of winter, the shortage of food, the bandits who spread rumors of killing, the 2 rebel armies that fought everywhere and injured the people by mistake. Not only that, but they also had to guard against their companions.
Chapter 482. Jiang Nongqin looked at Shangguanwan's serious-eyed profile and sighed secretly. If a woman's growth had to be built on injuries, it would be too cruel. After a short rest, everyone in the troops set off again. After the 5th day of the new year, Xiangyang district recovered from the joy of the new year. Restaurants, tea houses, and other shops opened one by one. The people in the district headquarters also began to actively prepare for the battle after the spring plowing. The training of the new recruits became stricter and stricter. At the same time, they had to recruit soldiers and horses everywhere. In other words, the subordinates were still working overtime. As the Lord, Jiang Pengji was still slacking off. However, there was one more person slacking off with her. It was Zhang Ping from the Mahist family. As the saying goes, a pillow comes after a nap. Jiang Pengji was still complaining that the scholars from the Mahist family were all dead. There was not even a shadow of them. Then, Zhang Ping came to her on his own initiative. After careful observation, she found that Zhang Ping was very intelligent and was a promising talent. Therefore, she brought Zhang Ping with her all day long and taught him about the woodworking workshop. My lord's wonderful ideas are really admirable. For an otaku who is addicted to mechanisms, what could be more attractive than a variety of model figurines? Jiang Pengji took him to see the models of various siege weapons. After her selection and training, the craftsmen in the woodworking workshop could already make some simple models of the weapons according to the blueprints. These models were not just for show. If they were enlarged according to the scale, they would be real siege weapons. Zhang Ping did not know that attacking and defending a city could be played in this way. It was very interesting. Zhang Ping, who was originally indifferent to this matter, was now also interested. How to make the defending party pay the least price to defend the city. How to make the attacking party pay the least price to take down the city. His mind was full of these thoughts. He even threw aside the water wheel that he had been studying previously. If Jiang Pengji had not accidentally seen his things, he did not know when the water wheel would see the light of day again. What is this? Jiang Pengji poked the water wheel model. Did you make it? Zhang Ping was startled for a moment. He smiled and said, Yes. I saw that the farmers had a hard time irrigating, so I thought about how to save manpower and make irrigation more convenient. However, I tried several times but I always failed. You see, it's not smooth, but I don't know what the reason is. Zhang Ping's ambition was to be a hermit, with a beautiful wife and a crane, living a carefree life. The direction of his research was also biased towards the livelihood of the people, unlike Jiang Pengji. Apart from improving farming tools in the beginning, the rest of her research was applied to war. Jiang Pengji said, Let me take a look. The water wheel was indeed a very bold design. To the viewers in the live broadcast room, it was very normal. However, in today's world, it was truly shocking. If Zhang Ping's research was successful and it was put into practice, who knew how many people would benefit? Jiang Pengji was very concerned about the people's livelihood. Naturally, she hoped that the water wheel would succeed. In addition to the water wheel, Zhang Ping also had a pulley for fetching water. This thing had been around for a long time, but it was not widely used. Zhang Ping planned to use it to fetch water. His explanation was also very simple. Some people lived high up in the mountains, but the rivers were at the foot of the mountains. If they wanted to drink water, they had to go down the mountain to fetch water, which was time-consuming and laborious. However, if they installed this pulley and tied a hemp rope to a wooden bucket, they could directly throw it down the mountain, which was convenient and laborious. It could also be installed on the wells, making it easier for the commoners to fetch water. It's a good idea.
Jiang Pengji nodded in agreement. She did not care how it was to be installed on the mountain, but the wells could be installed. Previously, when she looked at the files of the district headquarters, several cases of well drowning were written on it. When the victim was fetching water, the bucket was too heavy, which caused his center of gravity to shift forward. He accidentally fell into the mouth of the well and lost his life. If it was installed on the mouth of the well, the commoners only had to squat by the well to fetch water safely. The safety factor would increase significantly. In the dead of winter, Feng Jin and the rest looked coldly at Zhang Ping as he busied himself. He led the craftsmen of the woodworking workshop to install the pulley for the wells in Xiangyang district and taught the commoners seriously how to use it. It was still in the dead of winter. What kind of temptation could make a hermit who was detached from worldly affairs willingly do such hard labor?
Why are you all looking at me like that? Jiang Pengji comfortably drank hot tea to warm herself. She planned to dry some dried fruits next year so that she could make tea in winter. When she raised her head, a few of her subordinates looked at her strangely. Jiang Pengji felt a little creeped out. Have the improved seeds for spring plowing been distributed? Have the farming tools been arranged? Have the cattle been allocated? Have the fields of each household been counted? If not, why are you looking at me?
Get to work. Everyone sneered in their hearts. Then they buried their heads in work. They had never seen such a shameless person. This person was actually their lord. The only one who did not find it strange was probably Wei Si. Ever since he decided to push Zhang Ping into the fire pit, he knew that such a day would come. As a friend, he did not wish for Zhang Ping's talents to be buried in the wilderness. In today's world, one could not live in peace by hiding. With such thoughts in mind, Wei Si filtered suitable candidates with a clear conscience. He planned to conquer Fengyi County after the spring plowing and send letters to his companions one by one. As an injured person who was still recuperating, he could not work for too long. He could not bear to see a group of colleagues working day and night. The only way was to find someone to share the work. There was a shortage of talents. If it was not for Zhang Ping's incompetence in government affairs, he would have pulled him over to work like a slave. The work in the government office was quite heavy. The only praiseworthy thing was the food in the small kitchen. I like this braised pork with vinegar sauce the most. It's sweet and sour. I really don't know where my lord found such a good chef. Compared to the food I've eaten before, it's like chaff. There were 10 small plates on the table in front of Xueqi, enough to fill up 4 to 5 mouthfuls of food. Although they were all meat dishes, there were 2 bowls of vegetable soup that tasted great. Feng Jin silently agreed with this. Hiding behind his sleeves, he secretly touched his somewhat bloated belly. It was so delicious that they wished they could freeload 3 meals a day at the district headquarters. Only delicious food could eliminate their resentment of working overtime. Jiang Pengji's food was no different from that of her subordinates, but she had a large appetite. The amount of each meal was 3 to 4 times that of others. I suddenly thought of something, Jiang Pengji said. Why don't we secretly open a restaurant? Everyone was drinking tea to aid digestion after eating. When they heard that Jiang Pengji wanted to stir up trouble again, their nerves tensed up. However, Wei Si gently answered, "Why did my lord have such an idea? Those in power should not compete with the people for benefits. Otherwise, if the government and the business combined, how could the people's businesses survive? If his lord took the lead in doing so, it would be difficult to suppress the trend in the future." Chapter 483. What did they think? Was there a need to ask this question? Jiang Pengji's suggestion was undoubtedly a divine weapon to increase their favorability. If favorability could be quantified, she might be able to see that the favorability of her subordinates had soared to the highest level of loyalty. No matter what happened in the future, they would not easily change their minds. Jiang Pengji thought about it and added, "If we open a restaurant, we need waiters, people who do chores in the backyard, and shopkeepers who manage the restaurant. A medium-sized restaurant needs to employ at least 20 to 30 people. Orphans, widows, or those who are disabled because of the war can find a suitable position to support their families if they don't have a job. After all, if we ask them to farm, it's really difficult for them." Everyone was touched by Jiang Pengji's words. Wei Si showed a dazed expression and fell into his memories. Fighting with the people for benefits was indeed criticized, But what if the money she earned was all used on the orphans of the war and the elderly who had no one to support them? And the soldiers who were disabled because of injuries? How would they make a living after leaving the battlefield? In Wei Si's memory, other than the person in front of him, it seemed that no feudal lord would take these problems seriously. Many feudal lords just handed matters over to their subordinates, just to fight for a good reputation of benevolence and love for the people. With a good reputation, their goal would be achieved. As for how the future would develop, they did not have the energy to care at all. This led to a period of time when the situation slightly relaxed. The silver allocated for retirement would be exploited layer by layer. In the end, only a few coins would fall into the hands of orphans and widows. But Her Majesty was different. She really did it. It was just that she did the best, but her reputation was the worst. Why was it like this? Wei Si looked at Zhang Pengji in a daze. Because this person's temperament was too casual and arrogant, she only needed to capture anyone who coveted this batch of pension money, and let the greedy person gather 10 times or even 100 times the amount of money to return. Her attitude was unyielding, and whoever dared to disobey her without exception would end up with their heads rolling on the ground. Unfortunately, these people had a glib tongue and were eloquent. They smeared her reputation behind her back. What about Her Majesty? My time is precious. I don't care to argue with ants. In this life, he would be the one to argue. While Wei Si was in a daze, Feng Jin had already bowed with his hands folded in front. My lord's action is a good deed. Jin will naturally support it with all my might. If the generals and soldiers unfortunately died in battle, their orphans and widows would have someone to rely on and provide for them. The disabled soldiers would also be able to make a living. If this is feasible, I believe the soldiers will be completely at ease and not have to worry about the future. This action was benevolent to Feng Jin and the others, but to Zhang Pengji, it was a matter of course. The soldiers were willing to risk their lives for her, so she naturally had to be worthy of their loyalty. Feng Jin and the rest were moved by Zhang Pengji's growth. The audience in the streaming room also started discussing it. Lao Siji Lianming, I started following the live stream not long after it started. Looking back, the streamer has really grown a lot. It wasn't that the host wasn't good in the past, it was just that she was too tough and self-centered in the past. Now, she was becoming more and more like a benevolent ruler, more and more in line with what an excellent ruler should be like. For the people in troubled times, this was a blessing. Qijing Pokalai, I hope that when I'm old, I can still continue following the live stream with my grandchildren and tell them how outstanding the streamer is. Although she's just Zhang Pengji, she led a group of subordinates to conquer the world and gave the people a peaceful and contented life. Live stream, you must not let us down. You are these beasts. If I were a commoner, it would definitely be a very happy thing to be protected by the streamer like this. Buting. I believe that the streamer can become a true emperor, unprecedented and unsurpassed. Wangban Yanjing, I hope that in my lifetime, I can see my lord rule the world. The live stream room was full of praises. Even Zhang Pengji, who was as thick-skinned as the corner of the city wall, felt somewhat embarrassed. If that's the case, then I'll get someone to organize the menu. Zhang Pengji thought about it and said hesitantly, the income from the restaurant business is all used to provide for orphans and widows. In the beginning, the scale is small and the income is not high, so others naturally don't care about it. But in the future, with these unique flavors and dishes, I think the business of the restaurant will not be too bad, and the income will naturally increase. I'm a little worried. If the income was a few coins, who would care about it? But what if it was easily tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of strings of coins? Zhang Pengji did not think that anyone would not be tempted. Li Yun was a little naive. From his point of view, no matter how good the business of the restaurant was, how high could the income be? Not to mention that the restaurant had not even opened yet, but his lord was already worried that someone would embezzle money in the future. He asked, the income is used to provide for orphans and widows of the soldiers who died in the war, as well as compensation for the bereaved. Would there really be beasts who would embezzle money? Wei Si smiled and said, even Han Mei said that those people are beasts. How can we use the thinking of ordinary people to measure them? I think that my lord's worries are not without reason. It's better to be prepared for a rainy day. Since this is for the good of the soldiers, so that they will no longer have to worry about the future when they go to the battlefield, then this matter cannot be treated casually. Punish those who are greedy, lest the soldiers' hearts turn cold.
What does my lord think? Of course, Zixiao's words make sense. Jiang Pengji raised her brows. Currently, we only have one base in Xiangyang district. The scale of the restaurant is not large, and the income is not high. If we use this bit of money to provide for orphans and widows of the soldiers, everyone will think it is absurd. How about this? I will donate 20,000 strings of coins as the initial compensation. If it is not enough, I will add more in the future. Wei Si's fingers trembled. He almost could not keep the expression on his face. 20,000 strings of coins? Had his lord ever been so extravagant? Didn't she always want to break a coin into 4 coins to use? Looking around, it seemed that no one was surprised. This was 20,000 strings of coins, not 2 coins. Others did not know, but Xueqi was very clear about how rich his lord's private treasury was. Not to mention 20,000 strings of coins, even if it was 200,000 strings of coins, she could still take it out. Sai, who asked the people of the North Borderline to be stupid, rich, and squandering. They were too rich, they were too extravagant, they were practically fighting to buy glass tea sets and jewelry. No one could stop them. Not only that, the business of wool products in Chongzhou was also not bad. In a short period of time, they had accumulated tens of thousands of strings of coins. The first batch of silver was mostly used for the construction of Xiangyang district, the purchase of rations, armor, and the manufacture of weapons. The second batch of silver was the one that truly entered the lord's private treasury. After receiving it, his lord generously gave each of her subordinates a big red packet. Even Feng Jin's family's Chongqing was given a 1-month gift. It was unbelievably extravagant. If there was a ranking list of the feudal lord's wealth in the future, his lord would probably occupy the top spot all year round. Jiang Pengji looked around. Then this matter. Chapter 484. It was easy to make mistakes in this matter. Only those who were meticulous and determined could do it. If it was done well, it would be a great plus. The things at the beginning were not complicated. Wei Si could handle it with his current physical condition. When the workload increased in the future, his body would probably recover. More importantly, she felt that Wei Si could be trusted. He had the ambition to rule the world. Money could not blind him. Wei Si accepted it without hesitation. He was thinking of formulating a relatively complete compensation process. I will not let you down. Combining the experience from his previous life and the analysis and improvement in this life, he felt that he was the most suitable person to do this. Yes, remember to get Xiao Yu to approve the 20,000 strings of coins. Yes. Jiang Pengji did not value money. She often used her private treasury as the public treasury and left it to the accountant to manage. Xueqi did not know whether to laugh or cry at her attitude. Throughout the ages, which leader did not use the public treasury as his private treasury? His lord was capricious and reversed the roles. It was reasonable that Jiang Pengji did not feel distressed about the money. It came from the strong wind. Why would she feel distressed? Speaking of which, the North Borderline had already sold 4 batches of glass. Jiang Pengji felt that she could slow down and whet the appetite of the fat sheep. After the first month, the weather was still so cold. The entire Xiangyang district had an atmosphere of impending war. The people faintly felt that the atmosphere was subtle. The government office was busy again. As the saying goes, before the troops and horses move, the provisions and fodder go first. War was not only a contest of military strength, tactics, and wisdom, but also a contest of financial resources and logistics. Rations and fodder, horses, siege equipment, armors, weapons. Every one of them burned money. Especially defensive armors and weapons used in war, they cost a lot of money. Jiang Pengji could not let her soldiers go to the battlefield in plain clothes and holding a wooden spear. That was not a battlefield. It was queuing up to talk to the King of Hell. It was sending the enemy's head. Jiang Pengji heard the statistics in the account book given by Xueqi and secretly said, "Poor. If she could make armor here." Jiang Pengji squinted her eyes and thought of the plan she made when she first came to Xiangyang district. Xiangyang district was very likely to contain iron ore. However, whether the iron ore was real or not was her personal judgment. She could not be completely sure. Once she had some free time, she planned to bring some people to investigate. If there really was an iron mine, it would save a lot of money. After the long winter training, the new soldiers had already adapted to the heavy training.
Coupled with the ample food and water supply, not only did the soldiers not lose weight, but they also became stronger. The old clothes that originally fit them seemed a little tight on their bodies. Before, he couldn't even carry a load for 3 to 5 miles, but now he could carry a log and run a round trip. Therefore, a person's potential was like a sponge that could be squeezed out with some squeezing. There was no need to be lenient when it came to training these burly male soldiers. As long as they didn't die, then they would work them to death. Not only did the recruits and veterans have to undergo all kinds of physical training, but they also had to practice military formations. In ancient times, the methods of transmitting information were too backward, especially in a place like a battlefield that was constantly changing. Military formations could maximize the effectiveness of the soldiers' cooperation in battle, such as cutting the enemy's formation, surrounding them, outflanking them, and strategically retreating. All these required extremely strong execution. Jiang Pengji would not allow even one deserter from her army. As long as you're told to charge, you'll have to do it no matter what. If you were told to retreat, even if the enemy's head was in your hands, you couldn't be greedy for the spoils of battle. They had to follow orders strictly and strictly. Over and over, they had to repeat it in a dull manner until they developed a reflexive reaction that could immediately act when they heard orders. After the first month of the lunar year, the people in the men's camp clearly felt that the atmosphere was much more solemn than before. Their training was enhanced and their meals were better. The sky was pitch black. As soon as the military camp's whistle sounded, the soldiers had to get up and put on their clothes as quickly as possible and gather at the drill ground. In the beginning, most of the soldiers couldn't do it. After a long time, those who couldn't do it before could also do it. Of course, there was another important reason why they would put in so much effort in training. They were stimulated by the hundreds of female soldiers in the women's camp. Ever since the mocking incident in the recruit camp, Jiang Pengji would post an explanation notice every few days. The people of Xiangyang district were skeptical at the beginning, but they became skeptical later on. Some families felt that the girls were a hindrance, so they made up their minds and sent the more cumbersome girls at home to the women's camp. The number of people in the women's camp slowly increased to 600, finally reaching the expected number. Jiang Pengji didn't let others take over the training of the women's camp. Instead, she took the field herself. Upon seeing the situation, Xueqi secretly shed tears of sympathy for the young ladies in the women's camp. He was one of the few people who knew about his lord's ability to ruthlessly destroy flowers. As expected, the people in the women's camp who were looked down upon by the outside world and even had a contemptuous attitude officially ushered in a hellish life. The training load was only 20% less than that of the male soldiers. For these thin and weak girls, it was cruel. Jiang Pengji was usually easy to talk to, but once she entered the instructor mode, unless the female soldiers couldn't stand the exhaustion and fainted, or there were other unavoidable circumstances, she wouldn't show any mercy at all. As long as they were awake, as long as their noses could still breathe, even if they had to crawl on the ground to the finish line. The viewers in the streaming room couldn't take it anymore. Streamer, if you treat cute girls like this, be careful of the wrath of the heavens. Streamer V. When I entered the military school at the age of 5 or 6, the training I went through was heavier than this. In today's world, cute girls are used to be bullied. Without the ability to protect themselves, they can only become the playthings of others. If you pity them, it's not love but harm. If they suffer a little now, they will suffer less in the future. I love them, do you understand? If you love them, then train them to their death. This was Jiang Pengji's consistent dogma. Lao Ciji Lianming, children don't understand the streamer's love, but they will understand in the future. Kizuo Bupaba, although it's a little distressing, what the streamer said is also right. In troubled times, no one can protect anyone. If they don't want to be treated as a reproduction machine, an item to be bought and sold, or a reserve of food, these girls can only rely on themselves to work hard. Looking at the content of the streaming, almost all of them cried when they were kidnapped by their families. They were obviously abandoned by their families. Even if they didn't suffer with the streamer, they would still be tortured at home. Jean Tian sanging. I hope they can learn something from the streamer. No matter how weak a grass is, it can still overcome the oppression of a stubborn rock. A group of girls ranging in age from 13 to 16 cried miserably while gritting their teeth to train. Long-distance running with weights was fine. They could still dawdle and slack off for a while on the way. Weapon training was miserable. If one's posture was not standard, Jiang Pengji would use a rolled-up whip to help correct it.
Her attitude was extremely strict. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.